we again. Sit back, relax, we got the brain of band. No need to stress in the house, it's Van Bellen. The game is windsurfing, you can't yell them or tell them. We get the news, the views, the win biz. The brand's gear, just plus the world's best quiz. Cars, PWA. We're professionals without the pay. There's nothing in pole dancing that we won't chat. From tandem boards to a windsurfing cat. It's your what's out shot for a laugh and listen. Tune in each week or you'll be doing the missing.
Betty, hello.
How we doing, man? All good?
Good. Yeah, very good. How's it going? I see you in the water. I'm following your Instagram, Facebook. Yeah, back in the studio. Back in my little spaceship editing suite.
So to start things off, we were meant to do a podcast yesterday, but actually the wind picked up here in Portugal and it looked like we might not get something, so I had to go sailing. And that is one of the rules of being a windsurfer. If you're working within windsurfing, you need to go windsurfing, keeps the motivation up. Also that has spurred me onto the topic for today, which is how big is big? Does size matter? What are we rocking around out there? What have you got in your quiver? Yes, we're talking about windsurfing. And I think it is quite a topical subject. Like there's a lot of people going up in sizes in boards. We're going to be talking a little bit about the Puerto Rico event, which by all accounts, we weren't there, but we saw the social media posts from Anton and Martin. We saw a bit of footage. It looked light and it looked like you needed big gear. You know, some people probably didn't bring big enough gear. We're going to be talking about your local breaks as well, you know, so get involved in the comments. I really want to hear, you know, what's your smallest board, what's your biggest board, and what is your weight, you know, and we're going to be kind of trying to work out is, you know, where people are at with their bigger boards, how many liters is it above their normal weight, and all that stuff. Obviously, we're going to have personal experiences, and we have got a special guest.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, this is all. This whole subject is sort of spurred on by Puerto Rico, was it, Benny? Just because they had very light wind, from what I can see. So it was interesting, though, isn't it? It's cool to see a wave event in a new location. Actually, have they ever had? Do you ever remember a wave event in Puerto Rico before? I don't seem to really remember anything.
I think there's been some kind of regionally type events, but nothing that I can remember, and I could be totally wrong with this. That was on a sort of world level, but you know, I mean, it's quite a well-known spot. I think quite a lot of the Frenchies. I know one of the judges, Frankie, has been going over to Puerto Rico. I think it's Puerto Rico for a few years, and I'd heard of the Shacks beach, which is one of the beaches there, and like I said, pretty light winds. So we should really introduce the special guest. Now, he has been told he's not allowed to mention his current sponsors because they don't support the channel. They've turned me down twice, but he's such a nice dude. And he was on a brand that did support the channel. He was on Bruce Boards. Can you guess who it is? It is, of course, Mr. Julian Salmon. We're bringing him in. Let's bring him in.
Yeah.
Hello. Look at that hair, mate. He's had look at that.
He's pumped.
Can you tell where he is? Just for people out there, can you tell where he is? Because for some reason, that view just looks very familiar. Everyone who's over there at the moment, they seem to have this amazing view out of a massive window. So I'm guessing you're in Chile because I haven't even spoke to him.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, okay. You're very quiet.
I don't know. Should I maybe get on the mic, like some headphones? Is it really quiet still, or is it okay?
No, it's not too bad. It's okay. It's okay where I am.
Otherwise, I can put as well the...
Cool. When did you arrive?
I arrived...
Yeah, I'm hearing you're okay.
7 days ago, I arrived, actually.
Okay,
cool.
So let me just give it a pretty, obviously Julian Salmon, there might be people who don't watch the World Cup, you know, obviously he's right up there in the standings, got second place in Margaret River this year, which is a 4-star event. So what does that get you in terms of 5-star points, just to get some,
I actually don't know exactly. It's like, I don't know if it's like a 5th place or 6th place or something.
It's a pretty countable.
Or maybe or a bit worse. I don't know. It's I think 60% of like it's 60% it gives you basically, or or 70 or something. Yeah.
Okay, so it could be sort of like a 9th or a 10th. But anyway, you've already hit the ground running. Like I said, he has got new sponsors. We're not going to talk about. We're going to talk about how heavy you are. What's your biggest board? What's your smallest board? I want to know stats because I want to get straight into, the sizing of the boards because I know there's a lot of people interested in this. What is your weight at the moment?
So actually, I don't know my weight at the moment because I've been losing a bunch of weight and I don't have a scale here. At home on Tenerife, I watch my weight a lot. And the last time I weighed myself, I was 83.
Okay, you look skinny. You look. I say skinny. You look fit.
I could be under 80 now, actually, or around 80.
Is that a conscious decision to lose weight?
Decision, yeah. People make fun of me. They say I'm more like a boxer, losing and picking up weight. And I know it's not the healthiest thing if you drop and gain weight in the short terms. But I like to stay around 82, 83. And if I can, I just like to kind of drop it for light wind events.
So it's a conscious decision for competing to be at a certain weight.
For me, kind of, yes. Now it happened a bit naturally, but because I think actually the best is just to stay about a weight where you feel good, where you feel energetic. But personally, I like to think about it a bit as a conscious decision that I like to be a bit lighter.
And how tall are you?
I'm 193. So I'm pretty
small. I mean, you've got. Do you know how much percentage body fat you've got? It must be like.
I was supposed. I think it's pretty low. It was supposed to check it before I came here, but at the end, I didn't have time to check it.
You got to be around 8 or something. I bet you.
It should, yeah. It should be something like that.
Which is insane. That's insane. Because when I was doing the Olympic stuff, there was a few guys that were down in that range, and I was looking at them going, how? It's like, I don't know. I find it impossible to get anywhere close.
It's a lot of hard work, yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. So
what's the biggest board that you have in your quiver, Julian?
96 liter is the biggest board I have.
96. Interesting. So 96 and you're around 82. That's actually fits. And what's your smallest board?
The smallest board for here is an 88.
What in general? If we're talking, because you're obviously based in Tenerife. Okay. In Tenerife.
In general, the smallest board I have in my quiver is a 78.
Yeah.
But I usually don't use smaller than an 84 or 82. Because I just feel like when it's that windy and you go, like usually it's quite gusty as well. And like, for example, last year, Pozo, I was the whole event on 85. But as well, at that event, I was probably around the 85 kilos or 84 kilos.
Yeah. So you don't know how wide. Do you go just on volume, or are you doing quite a bit with width?
It depends on a lot. I mean, you guys probably know it depends on the button shape of the board, how well it sticks to the water. So on windier conditions, you want a board that sticks better, that kind of rides in a rail, kind of in a, like almost feels like a train. So then you don't mind it if it's an 85. If it's a board that feels really nervous, if it's a board that feels really nervous, you can maybe go a bit smaller. There are like a lot of details too.
Yeah.
With all the different brands and stuff, it's a lot I feel like it's really hard to give like a general sale, like this is your weight, this is the board you should ride, because it depends then what brand, what button shape does the board have, how heavy the board is, and then the conditions as well.
I mean, rail shape makes a huge difference. It's something I never thought of, because when you measure the width, you're obviously measuring from the outside the rails. But if the rails are super tucked in, you're losing so much of the width, and it just makes the board feel absolutely tiny, comparable to the actual width it is. So it does make a difference. We're probably on this podcast going to have to be a little bit all round, just to give people an idea. But it's definitely worth noting that those factors definitely come in. Something from a real tuck round rails of a waveboard to a freeway board, which are a little bit more. The width is, you have to take some off the width of the sort of tucked in rails.
You can't just go off the volume, just like you say, because you will have a board like from one brand has 96 liters and another brand a 94, and the 96 feels way smaller than the 94. That's just because of the width and the rails, like you were saying. So it's good for people, I think, to know and understand that, to not buy a board and then be disappointed. Because usually I used to remember you used to buy off liters, no? But a lot of people buy surfboards just off liters as well. So it's just a good thing to know.
Yeah, I'm learning that very quick, especially as I represent the average windsurfer. I'm really just starting to understand all the parameters of a board, because and the problem is as well, if you're buying a production board, you're going off the website of a brand and it's basically having a description, but that description can be not always 100% accurate for your situation or your conditions, isn't it? Because obviously brands are trying to make a board that covers a wide range of conditions, or for that matter, a particular market where they're selling most of those boards, isn't it? So it's just something that I'm starting to understand.
But it's definitely huge. I had someone I went sailing yesterday. I was on a 99 liter board. It's a big board for me. And then someone was asking me, "Hey Ben, I'm thinking about setting my smallest board. I'm thinking around, he's 90 something kilos." And he was like, maybe I could get this board. And I'm like, the thing is, if you're asking me about a general volume for you, I can give it you, but it depends on the board, because maybe not so much now, but definitely back in the day, there was some starboards out there that felt way bigger than the volume quoted. I'm talking a long time ago when we used to test, and some boards felt way smaller, and that could be rail shape, it can be width, because width makes a huge difference. So if you're talking about just a 95 liter board or a 90 liter board, if the widths are sometimes a centimeter, even 2 centimeters different, the feel is just crazy. And as Julian said before, the rail shape, huge difference, bottom shape, how it sits in the water. Is it, like you say, is it lively? Is it planted? So it is like a basic thing. But if you're just going to buy it straight off volume with never using it, never speaking to anyone, and not looking at any other parameters, it is different. It is different. So we have to kind of go through that before we sort of go into this. And we're going to go looking through the comments soon and looking what you guys have got at home. So if you are just tuning in, what I'd love to know is your weight. I mean, your height might be useful as well, but your weight and then the sort of volumes or widths of your board, however you work it out. But volumes is good, because I think most people use volume. Back in the day, we used to use length, which when you think of that, it's just even crazier. Like we kind of went to volume.
It's true, isn't it? Yeah, it's true.
Width is
that's true, Benny. Remember, it wasn't that long ago. I remember working in a windsurf shop in the 2000, and you're right. It was the F2 252 or the Tiger 2. Yeah, it was, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It was,
and you were like, you want a 270?
Yeah, that was the Axis. Yeah. What do you think? I mean, I know this is. Well, I guess it's related, but do you guys think that the boards sometimes are almost getting a bit too short, and they, because they're trying to pack in a lot of literage in a similar size board for a smaller board? Do you think sometimes they could make him a little bit longer and therefore make him a bit less thicker, or do you think that the current design is pretty dialed with this? Because they are getting, they're obviously trying to pack him in a lot of liters in a short board, right? Generally.
Well, I'll let Julian answer this, because Julian was obviously sponsored by Bruce Boards last year. I know he's got new sponsors now, but he's got quite a bit of experience with that really short fat board, which was the Happy from Bruce, which is kind of an interesting board. I mean, you tell me, characteristic wise, it's probably better than listening to me all the time.
Basically, I think I like both. I like long boards, like the boards I used to ride, like Ben says, with Danny, the classic shape, the Madness is still a board that is really long actually compared to most of the other production boards. friends.
What is long? Just for people out there, because long now is.
I can look it up actually because I don't have the dates. I will just look it up on their webpage.
Yeah. While you're looking it up, it's interesting because I feel the same way. I think for a bit, I thought the boards got a bit short for me, but they have their place in certain conditions. But depending where you live and where you sail, a little bit of length can make it a much more relaxing, relaxing sail. I'm going crazy. I've got a message from Mr. Mark Parry here. Hang on.
He goes, oh, is joining in?
Maybe, well, I don't know.
He sent me a message as well. Can I listen to it at the same time?
Look at him. He wants to get on.
He's busy. Okay.
I know, yeah.
Sounds like someone broke down.
Busy.
He's got to go pick someone up. They broke down. So Mr. Mark Parry will not be joining us. But yes.
You made a good point there, Benny. I think even going back a step from what we're talking about here is just talking about what board to get, but is actually really being honest with yourself about the conditions that you are actually sailing in. I think that's the first step, because you know what I mean? Because you just go, what actually am I? What are the conditions? Am I actually sailing 99% cross onshore or dead onshore, or is it 2 foot mush, or is it, like, I know it sounds obvious, but I think a lot of people, they go and just buy the sexy board because that's what they might think is a good idea, but then that's not really, the board hasn't been designed for those conditions. And I mean, I don't know, do you think that it's a fair assessment that it happens a bit, where you just really understanding where you're actually sailing and going, you know what,
For me, 100%. You 100%. Like sometimes the fancy board, the one that's got the rider that you kind of look up to, maybe it's Kai Lenny, maybe it's Levi Siver, or someone, and you're like, ooh, these boards look epic. This is the one. Let's say, for example, I'm just thinking Quattro off the top of my head, because I know a fair few years ago there was this famous line from Levi Siver that said the 83 or the 84 Quattro Pyramid was the best production board he'd ever been on, or the 88. There was some board. And I always remember it was written somewhere. And I remember a lot of people took that as, okay, I want that board. And they bought that board, but that board in Europe where they sail was not particularly the right board for them. And the other board in the range, which was, I guess, the Quattro Cube, would have been a better board. Because you need a bit of width to go through, like, just on basic terms, just for people who don't know, and I am very basic in this sort of stuff. But if you've got a narrower board and you're trying to wave ride on, kind of softish, not so powerful waves, you're going to run out of speed unless you're driving it. There's a lot of other things that come into it, but a bit more width will help you carry so much speed. If you've ever done normal surfing, it's the equivalent of a fish versus like a proper shortboard. And the proper shortboard is way better once you're good enough to work the board and throw it around. But if you're a little bit sort of relaxed on the board, you're not driving the board all over the place, a bit of width can help you keep the speed. Obviously, rocker and everything else comes into it. But definitely, I would say, and the way they've got around this is, Julian can help me out here because he's a bit better at this sort of stuff, but the width is to get you through those flat spots to keep speed, but then they've shortened it to make it more fun and maneuverable, because you don't want a wide longboard, then it's like a boat. So that's kind of the way it went in surfing a bit first with the black box. I always remember that as a surfboard being like one of the first short fat boards, and it just went crazy. Everyone was buying it. And then I seem to remember Danny Bruce was working for Starboard at the time, and he actually called the board the black box, which I remember thinking, okay. And and then he put that into Starboard, and the board had really mixed reviews. Some people loved it, some people hated it, and then it kind of morphed into different things. And then obviously as Bruce went into having his own board brand, it turned into the Happy, which was the new refined version. I'll let Julian talk about that, because again, I don't totally know every step, but as an outsider looking in, that's kind of what I remember the timeline being.
No, yeah, that's exactly right. It's funny actually with the black box. I think there's a funny backstory behind it. I don't know if I'm allowed to tell it, but I will tell it anyway, because You know,
Yeah.
you think we didn't tell it, or is
Is it the one where it wasn't quite finished and it went into production?
this? And like kind of with the video that they didn't really respond to him on the board, like they were, I guess, not so keen on the project that as he was. And then he uploaded a video on a prototype of that board on YouTube, and they saw it and went like, "Oh fuck, that's actually sick how he sails on." And he was telling them already beforehand in like mails and calls, and they were, I think, a bit like not as excited as he was. And once he uploaded that video how he was killing it in the shitty conditions on a 5.7, they went like, "Oh yeah, like could finally see the dollar bills." And then it all started working forward, and they developed together the black box. And
That's it's a super. I mean, I went on that black box. I was working for Board Seeker at the time. We were doing some testing,
Yeah.
and I remember getting it, thinking, "Jesus, look at this thing!" And I didn't know what to expect, but I used it like Tenerife in South Bay, the worst conditions, worst waves ever, and you could keep so much speed on that board, and like you could get it to slide out, spin around. It was such a fun board in the small stuff. I wasn't a massive fan of when it got better to carry on using it, but some people are and still are. They love it. So it depends how you are and how active you are, I think, as a rider. But there's definitely something in it. And some people's style, some people, the way they sail, they just really love that board.
So when Danny then did his own brand, and I basically was there right at the start with him, I remember testing boards, and he gave me the black box to test. He was like, "Oh, you have to ride this, you have to try this." And I was excited about it, but I had a bit of a similar feel like Ben. Oh, it looks pretty chunky, like. And I got on it, and I remembered it had the long front fins and a tiny center fin. That's how the board came. That's the setup Danny gave me to try. And I sailed it on a 5.3 day, and I liked it in Cabezo shitty 5.3. Like it was kind of like skatey, like a fish. For my personal style, I was like, fuck, it's way too loose. Like I really had to hold back, like almost on a fish, like really gently, and it would go around like 360 spin, like on the tiny conditions. You could do stuff that on other board would be way harder. So from there, I basically told Danny that for me, I think we should put normal fins on it. And we of course wanted to reshape it a bit for the new brand. So we changed it a little bit and put a normal set of fins on it, and changed the tail into a moon tail. And that's how basically then we developed the Happy.
Yeah. It's interesting to see how that board has kind of evolved over the years and through different brands. It's like, but the same sort of concept and the same guy. I mean, to be fair to Starboard, they had a board called the Fish, like back in the day. Like I always remember, I had a friend of mine who loved that board, but it never really caught on. It was slightly different, obviously, but it was kind of interesting.
Yeah. So that's the video I was talking about.
Bloody hell, it's been a while, isn't it? It's been a while. Yeah, it was super slidey. I remember that. The thing was...
That's what I didn't like. That's why I told him we should do normal fins with it, because the fins were way too slidey, in my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair to you, you like a lot of grip off the top. Like that's kind of one of your trademark things is, mega spray, loads of hold. So I could imagine you'd be, you want to push and you're like, oh, I can't push. Yeah.
That's true.
Interesting, actually, isn't it? So,
For example, for me, I love that board in like when it's as small and as light, like 5.3, 5.7. I used it in the comp last year in Tenerife. 105 Happy and the 5.7 was my go-to gear. But I think I lost my heat against Victor because I was on that board and I couldn't push as much, and the waves turned up a slightly bit, and then I should have been on a different board. But at the time, I felt like I didn't have the transition board I needed, that I would have needed to be on. And if I would have been on that board that I needed, I think I would have beaten Victor and gone to the final to compete about the first place with Mark, which annoyed me a bit at the time. But yeah, so for me personally, it's amazing, like you said, in small rubbish side on. But as soon as the wave picks up and it gets a bit of punch, me personally, I don't like it at all anymore. Danny loves it. He uses it. He had a time where he has been using it in 50 knots, like only as his own boards in different sizes. But I personally felt like I didn't like it then anymore.
Yeah. Now I'd go with that. That was my personal thing. It's like it was a very specific board for certain conditions, and in those conditions, it excelled and did stuff that other boards just couldn't do. And as soon as, like you say, the conditions got better, I wanted something I could just belt into the section, and But again, different people, different needs, different styles. So
my personal, if someone asked me on the beach about boards and stuff, and they're looking a new board. My tip is always, or if they say, "Oh, I love the board you are riding now, I want to buy one, it looks so good," I always tell them, hold on, like try my board. If you love it, okay, go order one. But I always say the best thing you can do is try the board you want to buy. Like if you have the chance, always try it before, because no matter what any team rider or brand is trying to sell you, you have to love it. And I might love something that you don't like it's personal, it's personal opinion. So if you can, always try it, then if you like it or not, and you have an idea of volume as well. So I think that's just the way to go.
Well, we had this conversation last week on the podcast. We were liking them to women. Like what you like might not be the same as me. Some people like bigger ones, some people like smaller ones, and sometimes looks from the outside that looks good, on the inside, behind closed door, are totally different. So it's like that in everything in life. Everything is very personal, and some people like different things. So I think you're totally there.
Yeah, no, it's, I was going to say, just going on from that as well, what Julian said was trying the boards. That's also can be an issue for a lot of people, isn't it? That they don't actually have the opportunity to try the boards, because I know from experience here, you look online and you see all the different beautiful boards, but you can only try a fraction of them.
That sounds like women again.
Yeah, it's tricky, isn't it? This is very
the Canaries for that, because the Canaries, I mean, they're over, but the Canaries, they have plenty of different. I don't know if we are talking women or boards now, but
it's the same thing.
I think Paul's got a bit of a delay compared to us. I think.
Okay, but talking boards now, they have plenty of good centers on the different islands, and some of those centers, they have literally all the brands. So you can just go to fly there on a forecast and try all the brands, all the volumes, and that's, if you are serious about it, of course, as well, you need to have the money, but there are cheap flights there and stuff, and it's not an expensive place to go. That's why it is so famous for Europeans to come. I can only recommend that to windsurfers.
Totally agree.
But obviously, I mean, you're lucky there because you have those centers, but there's obviously a lot of places around the world where we just don't have that. So I find that a little bit tricky. Like I end up not really trying a board until I bought the thing, and then I've gone, oh, okay, this is what it is, and so it is a bit of a process. The other thing I've been learning too. I'm only at the absolute beginner stages, but now, I've got a bit of a semi-sponsorship with Goya, and I bought a Goya quad, and the blurb on the website basically says it'll go onshore, cross shore, it'll do it all. It's a one board, do it all. Now and here in WA, I sell Coros, which is basically cross on pretty much, or kind of like that. And then you've got Nalu up the road, which is cross to cross off, and it's a pretty much a perfect wave sailing wave. And it's basically just not true that a board can do everything fantastic. I mean, I might be stating the obvious here, and I don't want to sort of put out in brands, but I just want to get into people's heads that you cannot get a board. I mean, maybe they will develop it one day, but as for where I'm sitting, you just cannot get a board that does everything perfect. And I think, yeah, you know what I'm saying? Because I think that that's important, because there's a lot of people out there that are just relying on the information that's being presented to them through a website. And I think it would be good for people to understand that a bit better as well, because I was a bit ignorant and naive to that. So for example, that Goya board that I bought, it actually works really good for anyone out there. Actually, I'm quite happy to share my opinion on this, but that board at Corro's, when I was cross on, or cross on, it actually worked great, because when it's cross on, if your technique's not great, it can be hard to keep your speed through the bottom turn, because you've got to really go sheet out, get your hand far back, and often most people probably are not doing the correct technique to maximize their speed through the turn. That board at Corro's works great. I thought, oh, this is awesome. It's actually a really nice board. Then I took it up to Nalu, and I was actually struggling to do the turns I wanted to do on it. I was pushing pretty hard, but I just couldn't get the board to really go do a tight turn. And then off the top, I was sort of struggling to just do a snap, a fast snap. It was a bit more drawn out. Anyway, I got off the water and I was like, I'm struggling with this board. At Corro's, it's fantastic. It's really good. And at Nalu, it's not that good. So then I took the board over to Mark Stone, Jager's dad, and he puts a straight edge on the board. And, lo and behold, the tail rocker on that board is relatively flat, and obviously it's not just about the rocker, because, there's concaves and a whole bunch of things. But I came to realize that board actually has a relatively flat rocker line, and which again is perfect for many locations in the world. If it's a bit onshore or the waves a bit softer, or this kind of thing. But it's just good. It's good to be, I think, open and honest about these things, and just know that boards will do well in a certain situation, but they can't do everything perfect. So now I'm actually thinking, okay, I'm going to have to get a different board for Nalu. Yeah.
The thing is with tail rocker, though, I know Jager has a lot of tail rocker. Just the way he has his boards. Be careful about comparing your board to a Jager board. I don't know if you've compared it to it, but I've done that before. And he has just a freaking insane amount of tail rocker, like compared to most normal people. Would you say that?
Tail kick. Especially tail kick.
Tail kick. That's what I mean. Tail kick. The tail kick Jager has, it goes like this. It goes. It's like.
Yeah.
Which is not quite normal compared to normal people. But
I think, I guess what I'm saying is, if somebody tells you that this board is just perfect in onshore and perfect in cross off and perfect in 2 foot and perfect at jaws, something's not right there. I guess that's what I'm basically trying to say. I think it's tricky, because a lot of you know what I'm saying is.
I fully agree on that. I would say I would say that's a lie. That's just a lie that people try to sell, but that doesn't exist.
Yeah. And it also depends how you sail, because what you want, like for me, like when it's a bit sort of mushy or the waves kind of, I want a bit of width. I want to be able to carry a bit more speed, if it's like, and then you go to Nalu where you've got a lot of speed from the wave, you don't want that width, like all of a sudden. Again, in certain conditions, depending how fast you're riding, you can get away with a narrow board, but some people like it because they ride slower. And that also doesn't matter, because the way they're using the wave. So I think you're exactly right. I mean, it's very rare. You can have a board that does it all, but it won't do everything amazing, or you can have a specific board that does some things amazing, but then in the other conditions, it literally isn't working. So you've just got to know how much kit you want to have, where you want to put that. If you're sailing in Tenerife and that's where you're sailing, and you go on trips to Mauritius and Nalu once a year, are you going to have a board for those conditions? Maybe not. Maybe you're going to have that board that just works in Tenerife, or you want this all-round board that can do a bit of everything, but you're never going to get that magic. And that's why you see the people in Keeper having customs specifically for Keeper, because that's where they sail most of the time. Yeah. If they come to Europe with those boards, there's very few places in Europe that will probably work with those boards. And sometimes some of the best places, even them, they don't work as well for some reason.
Yeah. No, I think
because I just think it's really important to mention. Oh, sorry, Julian, you go, mate.
Yeah, I think it's like there's like a compromise, and it's like you say, Paul, it's really important to mention that and to people to understand that. And I think Ben just said it perfectly, that you can have a board that kind of does it all, but then there's like always a compromise. Like you won't have a board that has the magic in all those different conditions. It can have the magic in some parts, and then there will a compromise in different conditions where it will hold you back a bit. Personally, me, I like to have two types of boards, one for side on, and one for side off and decent as well. That's what I'm riding at the moment. That are the two shapes I have. And that's, I think, what covers the best for me, like my personal opinion.
Yeah, because the reason I mentioned this too is obviously this whole topic is about, how big is too big or the size of the board, but it's obviously what that board is designed to do is a massive impact on the whole riding experience, and that's I just thought I would throw that in there. I'm a bit sort of late to the party with this because it's something that I'm really starting to understand a bit stronger now, especially with sailing different conditions. It might not be relevant to everybody, but if you sail in lots of different conditions, then you might find that you might need a couple of different boards if you want to, maximize the experience.
Yeah. So let's just go into a biggest board. We've kind of touched on it before. Let's say Julian's 82 for argument's sake, roughly. He might be a bit lighter now, but your big board's 96. Again, we've kind of give it the caveat about the rails and everything, but we're just going to talk volumes just to make it simple as we can. But as we know, listen to the beginning of the podcast because it might explain a few things as well, because different boards are pretty much different. What have you got? Go on, Julie.
No, sorry, I didn't want to interrupt your question.
No, it's okay.
No, I was just saying that 96 is the big board for here, but then for Tenerife I have a 95 and might even get 105. But this is what I'm talking, like contest. Like, of course, that's not. If I go on a normal trip, you won't maybe need those massive. Like this is quite XL for me, because it's just for these really certain conditions. But just if we compete like last year on really average conditions, it just gives you an edge. So I need to have that gear like 105 and a 5.7, but the average guy maybe on Tenerife will take it as a rest day or just go.
But we have to remember, you are one of the best guys in the world. So if you're talking about maybe having 105 as your sort of competition board for those super conditions just to get you up and moving, that's probably a good indication that could be most people's big board, or the gap. So 82 to 102, which is like 20 liters, bigger than yourself. So, and I think that's interesting. And I think if we have a look through the comments, we might find that might be the sort of magic big board for a lot of people. What have you got, Paul? What sizes and how heavy are you and all that sort of jazz?
Yeah, I think I'm about 86 kilos at the moment, and I've only actually got two boards right now. I've got a 80, I think it's either 80 or 82 liter stone board, which is essentially a Starboard Ultra Code, but not the current version, the one before. Like Mark Stone, for anyone who doesn't know, was the shaper for that previous version, Ultra Code, and he makes boards in Geraldine, and I've got a polyester version of that, which is perfect for Geraldine. And then I have the 88 liter. Yeah. And then I have a 88 liter current model Goya custom quad, which was supposed to be, well, I was hoping that was going to be, like I said, my kind of do it all board. But I have realized that I'm probably going to need to get a second board for Nalu. I'm going to have to I'm probably going to have to get a custom board, because that wave is just so perfect that you can go for a more dedicated wave board, down the line wave board. So I probably need to get a third board actually. But like I said, for cross on, and that board, it actually works really, really good. But that's the boards I have at the moment. I mean, I'm lucky in Geraldton. We've got good wind. It's not just the strength of the wind, but it's quite a steady wind. It's not very gusty, so you can sort of get away with slightly smaller boards than if you were in a gusty location. I think that's also important, isn't it? Is the type of winds that you've got. If it's a more steady wind, you can sort of get away with a slightly smaller board. If it's very gusty, you kind of need more float, don't you, just to get you through those holes and that kind of thing.
No, it's interesting you say that, because like you say, where you live, as we said before, has a big indication of what boards you need and how much, you're probably not going out in the super light stuff. You're like, nah, I'll wait for a good day, because you're going to get a good day, and you are going to get one. Gero is Coronation is like, when it's windy, it's kind of windy. It's very rare you would have that really light wind where you can't go out on that board.
Yeah. Although having said that, there's been plenty of days here where the wind we've gone out more float and ride days where, like it'll be 15 knots or 13, 14, 15 knots. And that board will still float me. So I don't know. I don't particularly want too many boards, because then I have this thing of like, what board do I use? I almost rather just have just a few that I can just get better, like know that board well, rather than have 5-6 different boards and only ride one of them every blue moon, if that makes sense. I'd rather just have a couple. So that's what I do anyway.
So your minimum,
plus I've got a bit of a lack of space.
You're pretty much going to have 3 boards by the sounds of it. You're going to have
I think
go on.
Yeah, that's right. I think 3 boards will pretty much do it for me. 2 for Geraldton, light wind, strong wind, and then 1 for Nalu, and that'll do me. But again, it's very particular to if you just sail one spot, then it's different. But if you sailing a dedicated cross-off spot to a cross-on is obviously quite different, so it really depends. What's your... The other thing too is it's not just about the board size. I mean, we're talking about board sizes here, but then obviously we could also probably touch on sail size too, right? Because I mean, that goes hand in hand, I mean, like, how big do you go there? And
I've had a revelation in the last 6 months. It took me a while to get it in my head, but I started using a 5.6. I've started using a 5.6, and I never thought I needed a 5.6. And I think if you're sailing in down the line or more cross shore, down the cross off stuff, you don't need a 5.6. You just don't, because you can wobble around, you can catch waves. I mean, maybe you do in Cape Verde sometimes, but like most of the time, you don't need a 5.6. 5.0, a good powerful 5.0, I'm usually okay. Because as soon as you can get on the wave, you've got your apparent wind, it's light enough to throw around, maybe a 5.3, but I've never thought I needed a 5.6. But here in Portugal, we're getting quite a few days which are a little bit more cross on sometimes. And that 99 litre board, or 100 litre board, let's say, for argument's sake, and the 5.6 is getting me so much more fun out of my sessions, because especially in the side on, when you come up to do a top turn, you want something to hang off. Like when it's down the line and you've got speed, as you come off the top, you've usually got pressure in your sail. But if it's cross on, as you turn and you turn back, you literally get no power. So you want some sail to hang off is what I'm kind of figuring out. And the 5.6, since I've cracked it open, because I usually keep it and then sell it brand new, I'm like, hey. But this year I'm like, okay, I'm going to have to take out the old, get it all out. And I've been using it way more than I thought I would. And the 99 board, which I'm about 82, 83 at the moment, that 99, I am getting so much use out of it. It's insane. And even yesterday, stacked on 5.0, I'm still using it because I couldn't be bothered to go to the car and get the smaller one. And I was fine. I was like enjoying it, which is kind of crazy.
Yeah.
For me,
I think it's really crazy. It opens up a whole new area that kind of gear, like to me, it opened up kind of conditions where a lot of people don't sail, and I actually have cabeza to myself on like 5,705, and it just opens up a whole nother conditions where before you would rest or maybe do another water sports, and this is like, oh, I can actually still windsurf here. Oh, nowadays with how they develop the gear, this is like as fun. Like, of course, the epic day is always the best, but if that's what I'm gonna get, this is still like heaps of fun.
And like you say, there's less people. So it's like a double bonus. You're like, wow, and it is mad. That's exactly I like in Portugal. I can't believe it's took me so long, because we get a lot of those days. Since I've started using the gear, I've realized days that I've given up on before, I'm now like excited. I'm like, oh, this is going to be sick, you know, and I can just nip out for like a quick session. Brilliant.
The other beautiful thing with those light days is just a lot less chop as well, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, you get that benefit. Yeah, that's cool. What? So the biggest? Oh, what's the biggest board you use, Benny? It's a 99, is it?
99, yeah.
And what's 99.
your? I mean, it depends, because obviously I'm sponsored by a brand. I'm sponsored by Simmer, so their big board, the 99, kind of fits in. They have got 108, but that feels a bit big for me. I think if you're taller, like Julian is, weirdly, there's something to do with that as well, which means you can go a bit bigger compared to your weight. And maybe some people can let me know in the comments if that makes a difference. I'm pretty sure. I think
it's the leverage you get. No, it's physics probably at the end. So you can have a bit higher. You have a bit more leverage on the board, and you can just use a bit bigger board.
You've probably got bigger feet. You know, everything kind of makes more sense. Whereas I'm short, and I think I wouldn't want to go much bigger than 99, to be honest.
If you go too big,
we may have touched. Oh,
sorry. If you go too big
well,
personally, I feel like at one point, if the board gets too big and chunky, it just gets hard on the knees. Like especially if you're someone that pushes, and if you then still ride hard, then like if you go too massive, it will be pretty hard on to your knees. That's my personal experience.
What I found, and I think I've said this before on the podcast, and after someone told me I repeat myself, I apologize if they're listening. But when it's too big and I had to go on 115 litre just because I thought I was going to be off and going and catching every wave, what I found is I couldn't move the board. So with like a 99, I feel like I'm still able to move it and generate speed and generate power. Whereas when it got too big, I was just a passenger, and that passenger thing actually stopped me getting into waves and getting myself to work the wave, and that kind of held me back. So I think there is an upper limit of where you can get to. Again, I'm going to go through the comments in a bit, but it'd be interesting to know where people have found with that. And again, it depends on your level.
I don't know. Maybe I'm sure it's probably been done, and I missed the party, but I think with those really bigger boards, if you go beyond 100 litres for, say, someone our size, Benny, that's where I'm sort of thinking, you know, if you just lengthen the board another 10, 20 centimetres, or like, you know, make a board that looks a bit unconventional, you know, but if you could pack all those litres in and make the rails thinner, it might actually turn a lot better than a big fat whale thing of 115 litres for someone our size. I mean, if you just go a bit longer, no?
There is actually a technique to do that they use in surfboards or in guns, which is you keep the center, like the core of the board, thicker, and then towards the rail, you do a drop rail into the rail. So exactly. So you have kind of the thickness in the middle of the core of the board running through, but then you can use still a 90-litre board, but you use the rails of an 80-litre board.
I have seen that.
Yeah.
Someone do that on a windsurfing board? I'm sure I've seen it.
Carve Machine does that. The guy from Cape Town, Ivan, I think he does that in some of his boards, that he keeps the bigger core and then he drops the rail I was talking with Danny about it. We didn't end up doing it on the boards, but yeah, I know people. There are some people that do that.
I know also there was
I think
Dave White told me a story about Quattro years ago where he had one made and he had a lot of volume pumped into it, but he didn't want it too wide. And he said the problem with it, he thought it was all going to be perfect, but he said it was like standing on a rolling log because it was just really unstable because it wasn't wide enough for the thing. So it makes sense with, like you say, the core being more volume.
Yeah. Yeah, of course you have to watch out to don't go too narrow, but yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. So then you still have the grip of the feel of the smaller rails, but you have the volume, especially if you're looking for a board for, let's say, somewhere here like Chile or Cape Verde, where it's kind of light and you struggle to get into the wave, but on the wave is usually powerful. So then you almost, in Cape Verde, I always felt like you struggled to get onto the wave, but on the wave you always had too much power because it's so offshore, so it's just trying to push you out the back. So then I feel like a board like that could be a big advantage.
What about uphauls? Do you guys use uphauls on these bigger gear? Or not?
No, but yesterday I did have a moment where I was like, I should have an uphaul because there was just no wind on the inside and quite a lot of current. So like when you were sailing, it was actually too bad. But when you were in the water, you just couldn't get enough pressure to get the water started. And I was thinking, maybe I need some, or there should be like just some mini uphaul. Like I can usually just hold the mast. If I can be really bothered, I put the sail over the side so it falls down straight. I get on the board and then I just pick it up in one go out the water. But I can do it if I have to, especially on the big board, because on the small board, it's more the problem if the wind drops to try and get the sail up. Whereas on the big board, you can just stand on it and just pull it out the water. But it's not a bad idea.
Yeah. Well, the reason I ask is because I know in the pro scene, and I was going to say, I know in the pro scene, if you have an uphaul, it's probably seen as a bit uncool because it's a bit sort of old school or something. But I was just thinking for the regular sailor, if you are actually going to be trying to wave sail in 15 knots or less, and the wind could drop to 10 knots and you're going to struggle to water start, that could be the difference between getting out in the water or not, is having an uphaul. Because I've actually, if to grab the mast from the water and lift it up, it's actually quite a hard thing to do. It's not, what I mean? Like it might be easy for Julian or you, Ben, but it's not the easiest thing in the world to do that, is it? For a lot of people.
No, it isn't.
Yeah.
I think there's
some technique, and if you don't have the technique of putting it straight like that, and you have to fish it out, then as well, it's easy to turn into the wind. Like you have to quite know, I feel like, what you are doing to master that, to get to do that technique.
Especially if you're in the waves. If you're in the waves, it's really useful to be able to get that sail out of the water, because sometimes the smallest wave can break your mast. So if you're, fishing around and you can't water start and you're in the water, you're better to have the mast upright. So if you've got an uphaul, I think there's definitely a lot of people should have an uphaul, and it just needs to be, a really good one where it's the right length, it's elasticated to the mast, so it's out the way, you don't get anywhere stuck, it's not swinging around all over the place. Close to the boom head, elasticated down through the little gap, and it's like, boom.
Because it can get as well, like kind of as a disadvantage if it's not probably set up like Ben just explained it, and then it gets stuck in the nose of the board or somewhere, and you just have it too loose. Like it can be annoying as well on the wave kit.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
No one uses it anymore because it's just like can be annoying, and I guess we all have the technique to get the sail out by the mast.
Should we have a look at a few comments?
Sure. Yeah, let's do it. You want to start?
Start at the beginning?
Well, let me have a say. We've got pen. I'll start here.
Should I let you two to that comment thing, or you want me to stick around as well in the?
Have you got? Is it wind today? Just out of interest.
No, today is no wind. The first windy day, next windy day will be Sunday.
Yeah. No, but you can go if you want. You're off the hook.
No, I would love to keep chatting, but as well as just some business stuff I have to get done. And anything? Well, before we go into the comments, anything interesting going on in Chile? What business stuff? What can you download? I mean, I can't talk too much about it because sadly, my boss doesn't apparently want to work with you, which is a bit sad.
Okay, well, you can go.
It's just a lot working with them. We are in close contact and just on gear and like development and planning.
That's enough. Boring.
After here, I fly straight to Maui for photo shooting and testing, and so yeah. So it's
nice.
just a lot of that.
It's good to know, man. It's interesting. When you signed for them, it was for me right out of the blue. So I thought it was. I thought it was pretty cool.
I'm super stoked. I can only speak highly about it, and I think we will do some insane stuff together in the future. And I hope everybody follows at least my account a bit, and can't wait to show you guys what we have been up to and working on for the future.
Okay, well, good luck. Send her my best wishes, even though she doesn't like me.
Maybe let's see if we can turn that around at some point. Would be cool.
No worries, man.
How could somebody not like you, Benny? I find that hard to believe. Thanks, Julian.
Thank you.
Cheers, dude.
Yeah.
Speak to you in a bit.
Cheers,
man.
See you, mate. Later. So comments. Pen Abled. Kilos, Nila Torch, France. Smallest pyramid, 86. Biggest Patrick, 83. And now testing a JP thruster quad, 89. My finding is don't trust the written volume to assess the size of the board. I mean, that's how accurate do you think the actual liter is? What they, would you have a comment on that?
I'm going to put a rumor out there, and this could be wrong, but it's interesting. There was a rumor back in the day, I'm talking maybe early 2000s, that brands were putting smaller liters, certain brands were putting smaller liters on their boards than was actually in them, because then in the tests, they were getting early planing, they were getting all sorts of benefits. And when, basically when people look at the tests in the old days, yes, there's a lot of written text, which is useful, but most people just looked at the graphs, and the graphs were like, a lot of people went, well, that did really well. That's the best. That did really well. That's the best. But it depends how that graph is weighted. If it's a lot of early planing stuff and whatever, and only one of them was down to, let's say we're talking about wakeboard, only one of them was down to turning ability or whatever, you could look at the graph and go, oh, this board's way better because it's faster, early planing, it holds speed. So there was a lot of that, I heard, a rumor. So there have been definitely places where the volumes are not quite accurate. Now, I would imagine in this day and age, and the way you can measure volumes and everything else, it should be pretty accurate. But as we said earlier at the beginning of the podcast, the volumes might be accurate, but rail shape, width has a massive say on how big that board feels. And that, I would say, is a whole, it's not another podcast because it's all relevant to this podcast. And volumes, if you look at any of the surfing stuff, I'm an amateur surfer, but they have gone way more down the windsurfing route. They always used to be about dimensions, but it's just too complicated to be a normal surfer. So now they've gone down the volume route. And straight away, when I get into surfing, I just go volume. And I know it's not correct because when some of these like custom shapers and stuff are getting so annoyed with people apparently because they come in like me going, oh, I want to have a custom board. They say, what do you want? We go, I want a 32 liter. And they're like, it's nothing to do with the volume. It's to do, with the dimensions. So I think there's definitely a lot of that in windsurfing. but we're going to keep it to volume because it is the most. Yeah, I remember when they went from length to volume and I was confused. And it's all about just understanding numbers. It's like slalom fins. When you're not into the numbers, it doesn't make any sense. You're like, well, how do I know what fin goes with what board? But then the more you do it, the more you associate numbers with it, you kind of just know it. It's like now you don't have to think about volume. You just go, oh, 18, 90 litre. You instantly know what that translates to in your head. And it's like sail size. When you're first new to it, you're like a 5.6, 2.7, a 5. You know, you don't understand it, and then suddenly you start to go, yeah, it's 5.3 weather, it's 4.7 weather. I think it's the same thing. So you know that was going to the point that should we, and it's been a question not that I'm asking, but it's a question that's been asked for a long time. Should we be going more on width? Because when you look at the top slalom guys, it's all about width. You know, yes, they've got volumes on it, and most of the amateur guys talk about volume, but actually the top guys will literally talk about width. And I made this massive mistake when I was buying my board recently. I had a 90, if I'm going to talk in volume, I had a 96 slalom board and 116 slalom board. And the middle slalom board's 106. It would fit perfectly in between. Again, didn't look at the widths. And they didn't have this slalom board. So I ordered a Monster, which is the free race board. Turns out that's not got the same width, and the width of the 106 Monster was quite close to the 116. Hence, I've got two boards that do kind of the same job. And if I had my brain switched on, I would have looked at the widths and picked a board which had that middle width, you know, between the two sizes. So I think width is massive.
Well, the thing is as well, I mean, the widths are generally on the boards now, aren't they? They are printed there. So it's usually it's usually they have the length, width, and volume. It seems to be the three main parameters. But yeah, it's such a tricky thing, isn't it? Because a board is a three-dimensional object, and there's so many variations you can do to affect the board's performance. So it can get, you almost have to become an engineer to understand.
I think the main two, volume and width. With volume and width, you should be able to, you know, without getting too techers into rail shape and all that stuff, with volume and width, you should be able to get the right size board for you. Because if you've got a 90, I haven't got any stats off the top of my head, but I always remember my old 75 litre was 55 wide. You know, and as soon as you start to understand, okay, 55 wide feels very narrow, then, you know, and then, you know, like your 85 is what, 57 wide or something like this. And if you're going to another brand and the width of their 85 litre is 59, you know, you're going to go, okay, it's going to be a lot. Yeah. It's going to feel a lot bigger, a lot bigger. Okay, should we have a few more comments?
Yep, Tim Williams. If it's the same Tim I'm thinking about, from New South Wales in Australia, wave sailing, my weight is 72 kilos, and I use an 82 litre quad as my small board and an 89 quad for light winds, usually 9 to 15 knots down the line. I thought plus 10 litres above body weight was the ideal size. Yeah. Comments?
I mean, that's big, you know, and it's interesting. We talked about Thomas Traversa before on the channel, and he can, I think somehow the lighter guys can get away with sailing bigger boards than themselves as a one board does it all. And I think it's not quite, it doesn't scale the same, you know. So a bigger guy, I feel like, ends up needing a lot of boards. Actually, I've seen Mr. Maciek Rakowski hanging out in the green room. Shall I bring Mr. Maciek Rakowski in before we go into this?
Bring him in. Is he naked? No, he's not. Good.
The boys.
Maciek.
I just have to tell Maciek something because it's hard for my brain, so it's going to be hard for yours. Paul is delayed about a couple of seconds, so when he wants to speak, you've got to try and see when he wants to speak and stop, because it's sometimes you start talking and because he's 2 seconds behind, he comes in.
I was listening to you guys in the gym. Yeah,
like
that's the thing. Yeah.
Benny, but what? Oh, sorry to cut in. What I'll do, Benny, is I'm on my home Wi-Fi and I think it's a bit dodgy. I'm actually going to go to my phone hotspot. So I'll sort of kick out and come back in.
Okay.
Hopefully it's better. Yeah.
I should have said this before.
Yeah, I was listening to you guys in the gym, and now I'm back home, so I realized. But it's super interesting stuff you guys are, and I've been grappling with this a lot, especially around wave sailing.
Yeah.
Where it's like, it's definitely a disadvantage to be heavier because you end up using a bigger board, bigger gear, but actually the wave is the same, right? So you have the same amount of power, you know, and the bowl, let's say, of the wave is the same shape, and you're trying to fit a bigger board in it.
Yeah.
You know, and the bigger boards, so many times they are wide. They're like, I don't know, like I really struggle with this. Like if a board's like over 60, 61, it's really hard for me to like turn it on the rail. And I have strong legs, you know, I can turn pretty much anything. But the difference between turning a board flat and turning a board fully on the rail, like somehow depends on the width a lot, you know, and just that transition from rail to make it to be agile, you know, like ideally I drive it like a 59.5, but there's the biggest 59.5 you can get is probably 95 liters, you know.
So interesting, just listening to that straight away. You come from a slalom background, let's say, you're straight away on it with the widths, which is I think the best way to talk about it. The problem is people don't understand that, but I think that is definitely a thing we should maybe looking at more is widths. And then the other thing is what you're saying is, you know, if you're a bigger guy, to turn that board, you've got to put way more effort into turning it. So the board is more in the water. So when it's choppy and I think it's harder for the bigger guys because some of the lighter weight guys, when you see it's choppy and hook keeper and stuff, they're not having to push too much under the water. And I don't think it's as relative, like it doesn't scale. Like this is kind of what I was saying before. Like weirdly, there is definitely a bigger disadvantage for the bigger guys. There's a sweet spot for the bigger guys, but I think as a whole, the advantage kind of goes to the smaller guys in terms of equipment. And you don't seem to need as much equipment as a smaller guy somehow. And I'm not quite sure why that is. Again, maybe someone's got some technical reasons of why it works out like this. But I think if you're a bigger guy, when you let's take Brazinho in Pozo, he's got a relatively small board. It's something like 70 something liters, and he's 87 maybe or something like this. And then his big board is over 100 liters. So it's like the difference is massive. And I mean, okay, maybe he's extreme, but I think the bigger guys seem to have the bigger quivers, and then the lighter guys seem to be able to get away with much smaller quivers. They change different boards, but in terms of volume and width size, they're relatively close.
Yeah,
I think also the sails, like you can't, it's so hard. I've never tried, but I heard that it's so hard to develop a good 3.0. And then even 3.3, it's really hard to get it stable. We've run through this with the foil sails where like a 4.8 or a 4.5 is super hard to make it stable because the boom is getting so short that it just, you know, because you are the same size, your board is the same size, and then the sail all of a sudden is half the size, so just so much smaller everything that it just needs to be different, and it's really hard, I think, to develop a really good small sail. So the small guys like Thomas Traversa, he would rather be like overpowered but stable, you know, rather than go around. But I think Pozo is the one place that the little guys, they have a disadvantage. But any other comp I'm watching, if it's Chile, if it's in Hoquipa, man, in Hoquipa, you start, I remember like being out on a 5.0 and like a 95 liter, and then there's Federico Mauricio with a 4.7 and his big board, whatever it is, 85 liter. And the angle, like you're going out non-planing, and the angle that I'm going upwind versus he's going upwind, it's just like 20 degrees different. you know. So the small guy ends up catching more weight. But in general, what you said before, to answer your thing, it's like, I think it's just a certain size of equipment sort of works, and we've spent the most time developing it as well. I think this cannot be overlooked. That's why for so many years big boards were crap, you know, because it's like we used to, like, in single fin days, like a 90-liter board was a massive board, right?
Yeah.
And so and now, like a 93-liter I'm using, or 90-liter, 94-liter, whatever I'm using, like with 4.2 in Cabezo, you know. So
yeah,
it really changed. And I think what changed also was what you said, that before they were putting less liters on the board, and you were like, oh, the board plays so good for the size. And now it's kind of the opposite, where it's like they put more, and you're like, oh, it turns so good for such a big board.
Yeah.
Because like now we had a few days with onshore starboard tack, and I've been using a 90-liter with 5.0, and I'm like, and I messaged the shaper, I'm like, man, no way this board is 90 liters, no fucking way, it's way bigger, it's bigger than the Goya I tried, the 94 Goya I tried, it's bigger than the 95 FMX I had, it's bigger than all the 95s that I tried. And he sends me the file, and the file says 89.5. So all the other boards, they must have been, you know, like a smaller, you know?
Yeah.
So there's something there for sure, you know, where you're like,
yeah.
So I think we are riding bigger boards with multifins, but I think there's also a bit of a
or they're now accurately measuring the volume, whereas before they were just inflating it a little bit. I don't know. I'm just
yeah. Also, but with the dimensions, as you say, they make such a big difference in how the board feels. That's for sure as well. But yeah, I went on some and the racing thing you said. Yeah, we go on widths because you're never non-plane. Like the volume, I think, matters a lot when you're not planing.
Yeah, that's actually a good point. Never thought of it like that.
Slalom, you're never not planing. You're not even thinking. You're thinking about getting on the plane. Yeah. But then what we do is we generally pack the tails. The tails are generally quite thick. And then if you're scooping out volume, you're scooping it out from underneath the mast track or from the nose.
Yeah.
So there's been like years when starboard, the medium board, we always say like small board, medium board, big board. And the small board is like, let's say between 59 and 62, 63. The medium board is between like, let's say 70 and 73. And the big board is between 83 and 85 wide. And there was years where starboard had a 107. It was like their best seller, so they didn't want to change the name. And every year the board was just inflating, you know. And at the end, the 107 was like 118 liters or whatever. So they were like, okay, you know, we just changed the name of the model to the width because this is getting too much, you know.
Yeah. Interesting. I didn't know that, but then that makes sense. I didn't think of it like that in terms of, like you say, you're always planing, whereas in wave sailing there is a lot of float and ride, and you know you want to kind of be on that sweet size. You don't want to be dying all the time. Oh, that's interesting.
With when I need a snorkel to tack, that's when I know the board is too small.
How's your sound?
Just checking it. Yeah, I know. Check 1 2 1 2.
Loud and clear, my friend.
It's not delayed.
There's a little bit of delay, but it feels better. Well, we'll see. It's obvious when we're talking, because as I start to talk, usually you cut in straight away, and I know it's because I've left a gap for you to talk. You didn't talk, but then you talk. Anyway, whatever. We'll work it out.
Sorry, it makes it sound like I'm probably just butting into you. We'll go on to the next comment, shall we? Rasmus Zarens. Hi, I am 78 kilos, bought a thruster 103 freeway for 6'2". Didn't like it, too big. Went down to 94, much better. Have a 93 starboard ultra for 5'7" onshore. That's totally good because of thin rails.
That makes sense.
So 78,
I
yeah.
think in size-wise, I think if you're around 80 kilos, I think that mid-90 board is your big board. I would pretty much go with that.
And the other
Actually,
thing is like there's good boards, and there's like probably on the market there's no bad boards, but there might be bad boards for conditions that you're sailing in. So maybe you took a 103 free wave, but you're actually sailing in like something that's not free wavy conditions. You know what I mean? Like, or that board is maybe more towards the freestyle wave market or whatever. And I think brands generally, or we as an industry, because we're probably part of the industry, we need to do a better job of explaining what certain model is, and which model is really made for, planing fast and whatever, and which model you shouldn't probably take to Narlu or Hokipa, and which model you should actually probably not take to I don't know, like light Cabezo, because that's so with waveboards, it's really dependent on the rocker and on the on the dimensions, and so the leaders don't tell the full story for sure.
Yeah, you're probably in the gym, but we were just talking about that before, Matt Checker, because I'm really learning the hard way at the moment by just buying boards and then finding what it can and cannot do. I was actually thinking as well, this might be an interesting sort of little segue to this, but for somebody out there who maybe not really up to speed with everything to do with boards, and they walk into their local windsurf shop, I was just thinking, is there maybe 2 or 3 things you could tell them to say, look, if these are the things to look out for that will help you decide which is the best board? Because dare I say it, you walk into a shop, the shop owner's got 10 models of some board that he hasn't been able to sell, and it starts pushing you in that direction, or like, I don't know, I'm just trying to be a bit like, it could be anything. Whereas I'm just thinking for for an average sailor just goes, look, I sail in sort of sloppy onshore stuff, it's 25 knots, and you go, and then they go, well, just let them, what tools can they have? And so they go, look, these are the things you should be looking for, or you know what I mean? Like, yeah.
The first thing I see is you should probably, like the very base of the board is the rocker, but it's hard to be carrying a stick with you and measuring rockers around the shop, But the one thing you can see directly is the outline. And if the board is very straight in the outline and probably has the white point very far forward and is really packed with volume underneath the mast rack and kind of in front of the mast rack and stuff, that's probably what we call an onshore board, which is basically like a European side-on board, right? And if you see a board that's generally narrower, maybe has more of a pintail, has a bit of a rounder outline, things like that, then it's probably a board more suited to riding conditions. This is also another thing. We say like side shore and onshore. Where I sail in Poland, it's straight side shore, but it classifies as sort of onshore conditions because the wave goes, it's wind swell, so it goes directly.
With Simmer, they class it as wind swell and ground swell, which I think is actually quite a good way to class it. And I think to answer your question, Paul, I think you've got to, firstly, you've got to do some due diligence. I don't think you should just blindly go in. So I think what are the stages of that? Firstly, you've got to hope that the brands are telling the truth. You would hope they would be. So, like if I just look at my own brand, because it's just easier, we've got the Flywave, which is a more groundswell orientated board. There's obviously some crossover, and the Quantex, which is a more wind swell oriented board. So if you are sailing in wind swell conditions, you've got to be considering that wind swell board. If it's windy where you're sailing, you can get away with other things, because you're going to rely on the wind a bit more. You've also got to look at your level. Are you a good sailor? You've got to be very good at giving yourself an appraisal. Am I good? Where am I? What's my level on the beach? I think also asking friends or people on the beach, what board you're using, what is this? And paying interest, looking, really understanding, because I think it's really easy to not do anything. You just have a board, you go sailing, it works, it's fine. And when you go to get a new one, it's like you're finding out now, maybe, where you started measuring certain things and understanding widths, all that stuff is massive. But speaking to people, and I know it's not easy to get people to have a go on your board. I'm not saying have a go on someone's board, do a forward loop, or go, try it next to the rocks. I'm just talking have a go in a straight line and see if you like the comfort of it. It sounds weird, but some boards you just feel at home with straight away, just the position of everything, how it works, how comfortable it is in a straight line. Some boards are quite flat on the bottom, and if they are over chop, they're going to do you a whole, other places in the world it's quite flat and you can get away with a flatter board and not a problem. But some places in the world are choppy. And if you've got no shape in the bottom to kind of iron out that chop, that will make a huge difference as well. And, unless you are reading all the websites and understanding this, you could end up buying quite a painful board in the chop. I mean, we've done it before. Yeah. And then other times you can end up with a really comfortable board in flat conditions where actually you want something a bit more lively. You want something that sits a bit more, a bit flightier. And this goes the same with free race boards, slalom boards, and all that sort of stuff. Some boards are more comfortable to sail, and others are a bit harder. Again, it is really horses for courses. You've got to do a bit of that. I think if you go in and you've got a good local shop, they should be able to steer you in the right direction. If they're still around, I would imagine they're probably a pretty good local shop. They should be able to look at what they've got in the shop, and if they haven't got something for you, should be able to say, look, we're looking at this, I haven't really got the thing that you need. And you'd hope that, I would imagine most shops that are in business now should be able to do that, because they don't want to flog you something you're not going to enjoy, because you're not going to go back there. But I think there is going to be an increase in test centers or ways of trying these boards. I can see the way the market is going, and I'm not that hopeful for the local shops, even though I think the local shop needs to step up. The local shop needs to be getting people into windsurfing. They need to be offering sort of like a test center stuff if they're on the beach. And if not, they need to be putting the effort in. They could almost be doing like we're seeing in mountain biking, snowboarding, doing their own testing. Because these are the shops that are really, we don't just want them holding, you come in, you order a board, they ring up the importer, they deliver the board, and they're like, well, what has the shop done? I'm hearing interesting things from the importers and from the brands saying, look, shops aren't doing enough. And maybe the shops are saying, well, there's no margin in it, there's not worth us holding stock. But I do believe that shops that are putting in the effort, they're doing the testing, they're making videos, they're going to the next level. This feels, for me, where it's going. And these shops will win. These are the ones that will carry on. And then I think we will see the beach ambassador. I think we're going to see the next level up, where the beach ambassador, I think Flickr have done it quite a lot, where they give some guy who's always at the beach in the wind, they give him a load of boards. He's happy or she's happy because she's got all this kit, but they're under the condition that if someone's asking to try a board, they just, lend it out, let it go. Because this is, if you've tried a board, you're about to spend $2,000, $2,500, whatever it is these days on a board, you're going to feel confident ordering a board that you've tried in your local spot where you're going to sail and you go, yeah, that was a good board.
That's the thing, that the local spot, there's no waveboard in the market that does everything good. It's just impossible to create one, So it's really, but every one of them, because I tried, when I was on FMX for 4 years or 5 years, there wasn't a waveboard in the line. So I tried everything I could get my hands on, and every board did something well. But you have to be in those conditions, or you have to recognize what it does well. And then also you have to recognize what type of setting, because the board, like sometimes if you put the fins too wide apart from each other, for example, the boards just completely stop working, So I think in a way it's a hard thing for customers, but this is the beauty of windsurfing as well, that it just never ends, never stops, and you can get stoked on one type of turn or something because you have this board that does something insanely well. Like now Benny's stoked on his 5.6, and he's been windsurfing for 30 years or whatever more, so I think that's the beauty.
And just touching on what you said before, Maciek, about, I think it was you mentioned about a straight edge. I tell you what, now that I have had a little bit of experience, looking at boards, I tell you what, having a straight edge is actually probably one of the most underrated tools you could have when it comes to choosing a wave board. Because if you can go into a shop and say they have 3 different brands, and you can lay them on the ground upside down and have a straight edge and just compare, say 60 meters in from the tail, see how much tail kicks there, that'll give you a fairly good indication of what that board has been designed to do, don't you think? I mean, it's
you've got to know what you're looking for. Like this, there is a lot of other sort of measurements on that which make a difference. And some brands have that flat spot with tail kick and different rocker. Some have a constant, and maybe that's good for the podcast. We bring some shapers in. We discuss this type of stuff. I think it's really interesting because I don't want to go too much into it. It's not my sort of forte, that's for sure. But 100%, when you know what you're looking for, you can get a rough idea. But nothing for me beats riding that board, because I've been surprised.
Of course,
definitely. But if you have a meter long straight edge, that please make sure it's straight, because a lot of the straight edges you buy in a hardware store, they're bananas. And if you put it like Paul says, and you press it against the middle of the board, and you see like directly, like, a board can have, I don't know, 5 cm of tail rocker, and that board's probably going to turn really well, but not going to plane that well, and quite the opposite, But as Ben says, there's so much more to it, because
of course,
just the simple, like, imagine you have V running through the entire board, and the V increases towards the tail. Then you have actually more rocker on the rails than you have in the center line of the board. As opposed to a single concave, if you have a single, it's the opposite. So also it doesn't tell the full story. But if I see, like Paul sent us, I don't know if you guys mentioned this, but Paul sent us 2 pictures of 2 boards with a straight edge on them, and one had maybe like, I don't know, 5 mil of tail rocker, and the other had like 5 cm, and that's a huge difference. But there's subtleties and there's different bottom shapes and stuff, but that tells a little bit of the story. It doesn't tell the full story, but you can see a little bit. So, but as Ben says, best just try it.
It was, but just to butt in there too. It's obviously I realize that tail rocker is just one thing, but I think it'll be super valuable, Ben, if we can have a podcast one day with a board shaper, because if you have a straight edge that you could bring into a shop, I mean, then you can look, how much V has it got? Has it got double concave? Is it single concave? There's probably only a few things that you could become a much more better educated onto board design, and just increasing your chances of getting the board that you want.
I want to get in the comments who you want us to bring in. Which shaper?
No, but there is a shaper in the comments right now. Alex from Tilo is right there watching. He just posted his comments. Bring him in. I get out and you bring him in.
You bring anyone in. If anyone's out there want to come on, let us know.
You can stay, Maciek. We've got space for 4.
He wants to go. He's sweaty.
Oh, you want to go?
No, I had a shower, but I need to eat and go sailing.
Okay. Well, that's cool. Just go when you want, mate. So where were we with the comments? Oh, sorry, go on.
He said he's still sleeping. But like I said, interestingly, if you want to hear from any particular shapers, let us know in the comments. I can't promise who we will get, but I know we had to get some people in. I think it's always interesting to get a bit nerdy. It's not even nerdy, but it's just interesting, you know, and the more you get into it, the more it's interesting. You know, from the outside, I remember when I wasn't into it at all, I was like, yeah, whatever, just give me the board. Because I was on production boards at the time. I didn't ever have custom boards. So I didn't really want to see the sort of forbidden fruit. I didn't want to test it because I thought I'm going to be upset. But that was the stupidest thing I kind of ever did, because what I realized is when I got a board that I really liked, and I just, as I've explained before in the podcast, it's like I didn't think about it. I just rode, and it did what I wanted to do without actually thinking. So I could just concentrate on competing, and the board just did everything. It just fit me perfectly. Would it have fit someone else? Maybe not, but it fit me perfectly. So,
and that's the one thing that is really, really valuable is if you're able to, you get a board. And I've been in this because I'm not a wave sailor, and I generally like just squeeze in 1 or 2 wave boards in my budget every year and just kind of, you know, just have whatever production board. But then like what really helped me is having some fins and knowing how to play with fins, and foot strap positions. So to kind of like, you know, if a board feels, tune it up. If a board feels stiff, you know, put the fins a little bit further apart, closer together. If a board is, you know, sliding around or it has no drive in the bottom turn, put them further apart. Things like simple things like that make you
change the fins.
Or change the fins. Change the fins. Like I went to Maui with a completely wrong board and spent the first like 5 days probably trying different fins, and then found this fin which would probably not work on any other board, but because this board was so stiff and so like had such a straight rocker, it was like a slalom board, then this, you know, really swept back fin with a super, you know, super soft tip, it made it kind of rideable in Hokipa, you know. So it really, this really helps, because then you get a board and it's like, if you don't like it, it's not over. You know. And throughout like the last few years, I managed to sort of tune those boards in a way that, because you want to ride a certain way, you like certain type of turns, or in my case, I can do only a few things. You know, I don't want to I don't have time to also change my style every time I get a new board, you know, because I go out and I want to have fun. So it really helps. It really, really helps that understanding. You know,
if people haven't listened to it, listen to the Mark Paré podcast we did on fins, because I spoke to like a lot of pro riders after this, and they were like, wow, that was super interesting. So don't think that if you're listening to it and you're lost. I've had a few other people saying they've listened to it 2 or 3 times. So there is a lot of information in there. And again, it just starts the brain thinking about these things. You don't have to put it all into action, but I think sometimes it is good. You know, and if you don't want to get into it, totally fine. But it definitely can kind of help you understand what's happening with your gear and what you can do to change it. And then it becomes interesting. The more you get into it, the more interesting it gets. And then it can get to a point where you're like, oh God, I'm now overthinking everything, and you can't even ride. So there is a balance. And it was interesting again with the Morgan Nareau podcast we did. He was the opposite. You know, you've got Mark on one side who's super into all this stuff, and he loves to get sort of geeky and techy with it all and understand it all. And that's how he works. And Morgan, for me anyway, after I heard the podcast, it felt like he was more like, I just want something that works, and then that's it. I'm just going to get on and ride it and get used to whatever it is. And I think both things can work.
For sure.
Cool.
All right.
Okay, I'm going to sign off. Thanks again for, I hope I chipped in some. And maybe to just plug something. There is a few podcasts that I did with some shapers. There's, I think, there's Keith the Bull, there's Ola Helenius, there's Patrick Dietelm. You guys did Patrick Dietelm as well. So there's, I think, 2 Patrick podcasts.
I think we'll get him in. I think, you know, maybe. I know a lot of people are asking for Ola again. I have spoke to him about it. about designing a board and doing some other stuff. Keith's obviously good, but there's other shapers out there. I had a chat with Werner Nigler in Brazil when I was over there, and that was also a super interesting chat. So I think the more we can get on these guys, again, it's not going to be for everyone, but I think it'll definitely be really interesting. I mean,
we had Tomen, we had Tomen as well.
Tomen.
Yeah. So it's on the channel. It's on the Windsurfing TV podcast channel.
I need to still keep uploading them to this channel. I keep forgetting. I've got them all lined up. I just keep having to press the button because I wanted to try and get them all in one place. But, stay tuned.
Cool.
Right on, boys.
All right, thanks, mate. See you, mate. Ciao.
Okay.
There's James Crocker down there. Are we bringing him in, or is it?
I was going to introduce, So
James
maybe Crocker, who is? Well, let me introduce himself. Let's bring him in.
Hello,
James. Hi, James.
Can you hear me?
Good to see you here, mate.
Can you hear me all right?
Yep.
Oh yeah. Yes. Yep.
Excellent.
Really
interesting. I've been watching the podcast for a long time. I notice you keep getting quite a lot of really good sailors on. So I thought it might be fun to listen to someone who's not very good at sailing and who wanted to get into wave sailing and the challenges that come with that, I guess.
Okay, perfect. Give us a little bit of background then. Give us your weight, height, and then we're going to get into board size. Give us a bit of background first, though.
So
where are you in the world?
Yeah, in West Wales, in Pembrokeshire. So I'm good friends with your mate Alfie. And so I guess a lot of the time, and again, lots of the places that you're talking about have wind that comes from the same direction a lot of the time. And the waves that come from the same direction. And as Ben knows, he's from Wales, right? So you can have cross on starboard tack one day, and the next day it's cross off port tack. And it can be 45 knots one day and 8 knots the next day. So we have to take what we can get, basically. So I moved here from Poole Harbour, and Poole Harbour is where I did all my windsurfing, and it's flat and it's chest deep. And I am 120 kilos wet, so I'm a really big guy. So what that means then is you want a board that floats and you want to buy a 150 litre board, it's 85 centimetres wide. It's got foot straps out on the rail. It's got a 50 centimetre fin, and it doesn't go on waves. So I moved to West Wales. We have waves. I love riding waves. I remember I went to Mauritius on a holiday, and I took out the Mistral Entrance beginner's board because there was waves and 6 knots of wind. I laughed so much that day, just catching waves on a beginner's board with a dagger board coming out and falling off. And this was before SUPs were invented, right?
Yeah.
So when I moved to Wales, I bought a SUP because that's the only thing that was floaty enough. And I said, right, I'm going to learn how to wave sail. And when you're out in logo high waves on a 170 litre 10-foot SUP with no foot straps, things get tricky. So you fall off a lot. And you break boards. You break SUPs for fun.
Really?
Yeah, you pull the mast tracks out, you smash the rails up. Yeah.
So
I ordered some custom boards.
Okay.
From Flickr. So again, Paul was saying that he kind of bought his board blind. Well, I went super blind and ordered 2 boards randomly from Flickr. I ordered one first. It was 130 litre, 125 litre, 250 by 69, I think.
Yeah.
5 thin boxes. So US box in the middle and 4 slot boxes, which I kind of sail in thruster mainly. And I liked that, but it was still only about my weight when I was wet.
Yeah.
And I liked it, though. And I thought, I know what, I'm going to get a 110 litre one because it's so brilliant. When it's windy, I'll get a smaller one, it'll be brilliant. And I thought, hang on a minute. Most of the time, it's not windy.
Yeah.
So I bought a 150 litre one, which is
150.
150.
Wow.
So it is 245 by 75.
Bloody hell.
Okay.
Thruster only. And it's got a power box, so it's banned from Wave Rally, unfortunately.
It's too fast, mate.
Yeah. But so power box in the middle, and it comes with a 26, which is what I use it with, and I use a couple of 120, I think, side fins in it. And for a long, long time, and lots of heavy people will probably kind of get this, I figured that the thing to do was to have a much bigger sail than everybody else. So if Ben's on a 5 meter, I'm like, well, I'm rigging my 6.5 because I can hold on to it in the same amount of wind. Wave sailing with a 6.5 when you can only just hold on Doesn't work.
Yeah.
So I thought, right, what I'll do is I will get a much, much bigger board and try and use the same size sail as everybody else. So now if Alfie's on his 4.7, I'm probably on a 5.3 or 5.0, so we're not miles away.
Yeah.
And I'll use, so sail-wise, I've got a 5.0 and a 5.8 Neil Pride Atlas, which are kind of the blasty onshore sort of sails. But I use a 5.3 Combat in between, which I can use for float and ride stuff. And I'll use that 5.3 and 8 knots to 30 knots.
So how is that 150 litre board? Does it wake? I mean, that seems massive to me. But I mean,
it is huge. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, I guess if I get a second version, which I might, but they're very expensive, right? I would ask for a thinner, more drawn out tail on it. Because the problem I have is I have to open the back pusher up so wide to get your foot onto the far rail to turn it. I don't know how wide it is for the foot straps. I've not measured it.
It'd be interesting, like, you know, because I don't know. Obviously, there's a market there. It's not a massive market for the big guy who wants this kind of board, which is pretty big, 150 litre. But it's not big in terms of what other people are using. Let's say me, 80 kilos, using a 99. You know, it's not crazy.
It's exactly the same. It's 20%. It's 20% of my body weight in reserve.
Yeah. So, but as you just said, then the problem is when you're scaling everything up, it's not so relative because your foot size might not be much bigger than normal. You know, so everything gets bigger and you're further out. But maybe there is some kind of funky designs, which, like you say, the tail gets pulled in. There's maybe, again, it'd be really interesting to see who's done much experimenting with those big boards, because I guess the problem is finding the right tester to test the boards. I mean, who tests it? You know, because you need reliable data. I'm not saying you haven't got reliable data, but you know, you need someone that you know is able to give that feedback. So they would have to work with them for a while to understand if that person they've got doing the testing is relevant to the rest of the market. You know,
so have you seen that Exocet, the long rider or whatever it's called, the one with the big?
Yeah, well, I was going to ask you about that. Have you tried that Exocet? Because
I'd love to. I've never even seen one in the UK, let alone had a chance to ride one. I think if I was a millionaire, if I won the lottery, I'd get Flickr to make me a load of boards with slightly different tails. And I'd certainly get one of those. I spoke to Alex at Tilo about their board. They've got a similar thing as well.
Yeah.
But again, you know, by the time you've gone through the effort of getting that imported from Miami to London, I've got to collect it from the dockyard. It's £3,000.
Yeah.
I don't have £3,000.
On a blind purchase.
Yeah, absolutely blind. So for a longboard type thing, I've never even tried. I did really enjoy riding the SUPs, but although they've got mast track inserts in them, they are not designed. Yeah, there's the one. They are not designed for use in waves. Whereas that obviously is a windsurfing board construct.
This seems interesting. This is the Exocet. So how big is the Exocet? Because when we did the feature in the Defi, I was speaking to Patrice about it and stuff, and it looked really interesting. When you see the video, it looks awesome. Yeah, he's smacking it on it. Obviously, it's longer, and that would be my worry with that Flickr. That's why I was asking you, because it's very wide, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's still kind of relatively short, but the problem is because you've gone so wide, then that's the problem you're having with the tail. Whereas this thing, I think I seem to remember it's got like and this is very interesting, and maybe this is also interesting to see, is the tail underneath the tail. It's like got cutaways. Step tail. Yeah, big step tail, exactly.
So, I mean, I think, again, the reason I've gone wide is that it's not just for wave riding, right? So, you know, if you live in Wales and you only want down-the-line wave sailing, you sell 10 days a year. So, I also put a 6.5 on it and a 36 centimetre fin for when it's flat.
Interesting.
But because I can get out and so it's got to be that big, because we get a lot of current, we get a lot of white water. And like you were saying earlier, you know, when you can't water start because you're drifting in the current.
Yeah.
Well, in that sort of wind, if you're on a board that's sinking, you're not even going to catch any waves, right?
Yeah.
And my thinking was, I need to be able to get out. I quite often, although I'm not the greatest windsurfer, I can get out when other people can't because I float.
Yeah.
And if you float, you catch more wave.
Yeah, I'm just loving a look at this. It's interesting. What was the litres? What did it say the litres were on that board?
Hold on, let me just pause this. There is three sizes.
Yeah, I can't read it from my eyesight is.
Oh, okay. Well, there's 100. There's 125 liters, 145, and 160.
Okay, so yeah. Chunky.
Yeah,
Sorry, Paul.
Oh, that's sorry. I was going to say the 125 liter is 63 centimeters wide and 274 centimeters long. Yeah.
So the great thing about length, as I was in the comments a bit later on as well, if it's light and it's slightly offshore, a longboard really glides into a wave really well.
Yeah.
So, like when we was looking at the stuff from Fiji, Paul, when you were doing the filming from the boat there for that event, it looks like the wind was slightly onshore at the top, and as it wraps around the reef, it gets more offshore.
Yep.
So that's kind of perfect because it's onshore. You can pump yourself onto a wave even when it's quite fat. If it's offshore and you're trying to pump yourself onto a wave, a longboard really helps because it's gliding. It's not trying to plane. And if it's moving 6 knots, it picks a wave up.
And that goes back to what Paul said earlier about maybe more length in the board.
Yeah.
But you've still got the volume. So you haven't got this sort of width, which can be a good thing, when you're sailing in waves. But you've got the volume to give you that flotation. So it is. Yeah. It is interesting.
But I mean, I've just never seen one. So I don't know how. And again, it's probably £3,000 by the time you've got one.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is obviously kind of on the other extreme end of what I was talking about, because what I was talking about is just, putting an extra 10 centimeters on a traditional shortboard. Whereas this is more like the Malibu of the windsurf world, I guess. But it's, it'd be cool if somebody in the comments has actually got one of these boards because it's certainly different.
What's it called?
Was it Kona or the mini tanker or something they used to make a long time ago?
Yeah. This one's called.
I've made one of these for a long time in some form or other.
Yeah, it's called the Breeze 6. Ben, it says here, like the blurb, a true wave catcher and crafted in the style of a surf longboard. The Breeze is designed to shine where its more radical cousins struggle in super light and marginal winds. Interesting. Yeah. So the other one that was somebody wrote in the comment as well was the Sea Lion board.
Oh yeah, from AHD.
Yeah, I'll quickly see if while you guys chat away, I'll see if I can find that one.
Yeah, but I guess the thing is, obviously, what I've had to do is buy a couple of boards that work well in more or less everything. Yeah. So obviously, I wouldn't want to be going out on one of those things if it's cross onshore and knee high, 25, 30 knots. Yeah. So your normal board is much better for that.
Yeah. Interesting. I'm just looking through the comments because we obviously missed a lot. Jan says, "Hi guys, I have my Quantex 109 since last summer. And it's changed it all. I can tune it for all conditions and can ride from 6.0 down to 4.2. That's 90 kilos and 196, so really tall. And I think that goes with what I said earlier. The taller guys can get away or use bigger volume boards without too much kind of downside. Who else we got here? We've got Joao saying, unfortunately, the brand's developed very nice wave boards with volume for heavy guys. I can ride better waves with my JP Magic Wave 115 than my old Freestyle Wave 101. And I think they've definitely got better, but there is a size, the upper size, I think, for most of the brands now is about 115. There may be the 120 out there, but a lot of them are 110 to 115 as the bigger production boards, let's say. Matty Clare says a 95 kilo guy is nearly 50% bigger than a 65 kilo guy, but they will not be 50% taller. And it's the same with the feet size and, all that stuff. And I think this is kind of some valid points as well. Bill is kind of changing the thing here, which is quite interesting. But he says they had a very light winds in Puerto Rico IWT event. Takara Ishii did well at 65 kilos on a 105 litre waveboard, which is kind of insane. But I do have some extra news on that because I actually spoke to Mr. Mark Paré the other day. We were going to get him on yesterday, but I ended up going sailing, so I apologize, to talk a little bit about what happened in Puerto Rico, because we did see a few comments going around. Antoine Martin, specifically, I saw a story from him talking about he was upset. He got knocked out early, and they were sailing the quarterfinals, semifinals in some really light conditions. And a lot of the guys didn't have big enough equipment. They didn't take it because you're traveling around the world. You know, you'd have needed, from what I can understand from the video, you would have needed some pretty massive equipment. Takara Ishii, I think Mark said he went out for one heat and it got cancelled in the end on 105 litre. But Bernd Rodiger, who ended up winning it, he borrowed a board. And the problem was even just making it out through the break, because the place they were sailing was pretty gnarly. I think it was called Shack's Beach. And they had quite a lot of reef and things sticking up, but light winds. And it was quite a gnarly break. So a lot of the guys, Mark said he didn't even make it to start the heat. So he didn't actually get out in time. They thought they were going to cancel it, and he just didn't cancel it. And there was a few guys that was catching a few waves, but there was a little bit of 50-50. And this is a whole new conversation, and maybe a different podcast is, you know, what is too light? When should it be a counting result? Because obviously the downsides to not having a result is all the sponsors, all the people that have made Puerto Rico happen for the first time ever, a 4-star event, you know, really come together, and then you don't have a result. The downside on the sailor side is it's a counting result, and that could be a 5th in the World Cup. So, you know, there's definitely different ways to look at it, but I do think that's probably a different podcast.
Yeah, Scott McKercher happened to him, didn't it?
Well, again, yeah. But again, with the Scott McKercher case, from what I can understand, is the 2 other guys in the heat were planing, or not planing, but catching waves and had no problems. Where, from what I could understand in Puerto Rico, even the guys catching waves were quite, it was on the edge. I think there's different ways of looking at it. I'm definitely a fan of getting a result. You know, I really am, because I think we want to keep these events coming. And if you end up, how do you tell a sponsor? Some of these outside sponsors that put money in don't understand no result. They're like, how we've paid all this money. Do we get it back? You're like, well, no, we've spent all the money, but we didn't get a result. It's pretty difficult that. The other alternative is you run a fun event, you know, not a fun event, but the actual result isn't a counting result, but it's an event result. So maybe it doesn't count towards a World Cup at that high level, but maybe the points get downgraded. It could be that. I don't know how you say it, you know, or it just counts as a Puerto Rico event result, and they can give to the sponsors all the results, but it doesn't count to the World Cup. I don't know what it would be an interesting conversation, but I'd probably prefer to have it with guys that were there and can give first, you know, an account of it. But yeah.
I'll bring in this screen, because just quickly finishing up on, where is it? This is the Sea Lion. So this is just another alternative to, you know, a big board. I'll sort of pause it here because you can obviously see what this board looks like. It's basically a big fish.
So yeah, for people who can't see it, who listen audio only, it's like a big swallowtail, like old school fish tail. It looks quite funky, doesn't it? I mean, it does look really funky.
Actually, super interesting where the foot straps are. For anyone who can't see, but the back foot straps is in the middle of the board towards the back, but then the front foot strap is basically right behind the mast track, but in the middle of the board. So it's obviously
you know, windsurfing with those foots, because that looks like kind of where you would have them surfing, I guess. But
yeah,
it's a big board to have your foot in the middle like that. I'm always very scared. Like, I would say, just a warning to people out there, if you've got a wide board and your feet are in the middle and it's a very flat deck, it's really dangerous, because when the board, being that wide, has got a lot of leverage over your ankles. So if you haven't got shape in the deck, when the board gets pushed away from you and your ankle comes down, there's nowhere for it to go, and you can really mess up your Achilles and all sorts of problems. Like I had that with an old freestyle board.
Interesting. Yeah, no, I've never had no experience with a board like that, but it makes sense. I'll keep playing it so we can see what is going on here.
Yeah, because they foil that thing as well.
Yeah, he's going surf foiling. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh no, this video. No, hold on. This video does both. Let me just. Here we go. So I just fast forward it a bit, because it's basically a board that does a bit of everything. I think you can foil it, you can windsurf, you can sup it. But here we go. So it's this is the other thing too. I've seen this video before, but if you look at the sail, it's a soft sail. It's got it's either 2 or 3 battens. You know, I think the sail is obviously making it. You know what I mean? That's a very powerful sail.
Yeah. Oh, boom!
So it's
the only
it's pretty
thing
light winds.
I will say about, well, yeah, I was thinking the opposite. I was thinking it looked quite windy. You don't think? No.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, well, that doesn't look so windy, does it? It's very offshore.
Yeah, very offshore. I was just thinking because sometimes I see these videos on these big boards, but I often think, it looks like you ride a normal board in that. But actually, you're right. It's just blowing the. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it might be enough wind for a shorter board, but obviously a board like that, you could get going in virtually no wind. You could probably wave sail in 5 to 6, 7 knots, I guess.
Yeah.
But it's interesting, isn't it? I guess it's another take on winds in a wave boards and what you can do. But
so I guess
it's cool to see.
It's very, very domed in the deck because it's a windsurfing board. So obviously, because the foot straps are really inboard, and I want to use it with a big sail as well and go blasting, it's curved. Obviously, I tighten the foot straps up if it's flat so I can get some leverage on it. But I guess before I disappear off, I think just say to people, don't be worried about big boards. If you're really heavy, you're going to need to find something big.
Yeah.
And you can't go wave riding, even with a real. Now you take, I don't know, duotone gecko or whatever they call the Fanatic geckos that are 150 liters. There's no way you turn that on a wave.
The free move. Yeah.
Yeah, they just doesn't work. So, you know, or the RRDs that are 85 wide or whatever, they just don't turn on waves. They're great for blasting. But yeah. So yeah, look, thanks for having me on. I will.
No worries. Well, just out of interest, have you used any production boards in the bigger sizes? Anyone?
Well, the best one I ever found was a Fanatic Eagle, which I think they've brought back, and I think the duotone Eagle exists again because it's very difficult to find anything with a single foot strap in the back. So that had a single foot strap at the back and inboard options. That was 130 liters, and that was pretty good. But again, it's only got a single fin box. It's got a power box, so you don't get that kind of same sort of surfy feel. But I mean, I haven't used a board with more than one back foot strap on it for 25 years.
And I have another question. When the Flickr, let's say, made you this board, did they have any? Was this the first board they've made in 150, or was they just off a file that they made for someone else? They've
done 130s. Yeah, they've done 130s, 140s. There's a couple of guys in Germany, I think, big guys in Germany that have got them. But yeah, I mean, they obviously make whatever you like, and they did say, "Oh, I wouldn't do that. I would do this." Or
I was just wondering if someone had like refined the design, or they've just scaled because sometimes scaling up doesn't work at a certain level. Obviously, you're happy with it, so it obviously does work. But I was just wondering if they, had a kind of run of these boards where they'd kind of refined it, changed it, adjusted it, or.
I mean, again, I don't know. There might be another version that's loads better from them, but it's just the ones that I've got.
Yeah,
and the bigger one definitely feels easier than the smaller one. The power because it's also got a rocker 4 rather than rocker 3, which I think so. 1 is the Hookeeper rocker, 10 is the Longboard.
Oh, okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, they let you choose that, but the bigger one has got a 4 rather than a 3.
Okay.
And the amazing about that, actually, the Neil Pride importer guy for the UK used it. It's just you get half around a jibe, it accelerates through the middle of the jibe and almost kind of flips the rig for you.
Yeah.
So it really does kind of flatter your sailing. As soon as you bear away a bit, it tips off downwind and kind of the sail it is a really, really good thing. But yeah, I'd love to have one 15 centimeters longer and narrower in the tail.
Yeah, because I've heard a few people from bigger guys saying, sometimes they found the free waves are actually working better. Because their wave boards, people thought they wanted more rocker in the bigger boards because no one makes a bigger wave board. So they'd had more rocker, which would explain what you say about rocker 3 and rocker 4. But actually they found that sort of more free wave rocker, which is, I guess, a more like a 4 rocker or whatever it is, was actually better because the weight, I can't put it into words because I can't quite remember, but I just remember the overall tone was the flatter board was working better in the bigger sizes because you need it to be a bit flatter. Otherwise, it just pushes too much water, and it's harder to get it to.
Well, I think Starboard made something called a new Evo in a 120.
Okay.
This is before they changed, because I think it then became a Severn wave or something.
Yeah.
But before Severn happened, I think they had a 120 starboard, and that looked attractive.
That was nice.
A friend of mine bought it, but it seemed to me that that was a very light wind waveboard for an ordinary sized person.
Yeah.
Not an all-round waveboard for a very heavy person.
Interestingly, I tried one of their big boards. It wasn't that 121, but it was a big one. I can't remember. There might have been a one size down, and it was like a twin fin. And I actually thought that made a lot of sense. But again, I was a small guy riding a big man's board, and I don't know if the two things go together. Like you say, sometimes they don't go together. There are different sort of designs.
So I also need a board, right, that's going to be sort of controllable in the sort of chop that you get when you're on a 5 meter sail.
Yeah.
So that new Evo was pretty flat because it was designed to go and catch waves in hardly any wind with an ordinary sized person on it.
Gotcha.
So it's coming out from that. And obviously I'm not attaching any blame to the companies, because who's going to make waveboards for 120 kilo people?
Yeah. No, it's a custom. It is a
waveboard,
custom
board. It's a small market anyway, right?
Yeah. No, it's a custom board. You're right.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Cool. All right. Well, look, I'll send you over some pictures. If you want to put the pictures of the boards on, stick them on.
Okay. All right.
No, cool. Good on you, James. Thanks for joining in, mate. That's super
Later.
interesting. Thanks. See you, mate.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, dude. And there we go. I can really say that if people do want to come on and they've got a mic, they've got a camera, and they want to chat about something to do with windsurfing, you're just a viewer, but you've got an interesting story. It can be, on this podcast, other podcasts. If you think it's worthwhile, let us know in the comments, and we can probably send the link over, because it is always interesting to hear.
Yeah, so cool, so cool. Is there more comments there, Benny, that we need to chop through?
Quite a few. I'm just going back through them.
Sort of lost track of where we're at.
JJB says a problem as a bigger guy, you need a bigger sail, and they don't turn as well. Again, I'm reading from back to front here, so it might not go quite so well, but we've got Michael Snare says 77 kilos. He's got a Goya custom quad, 80 litres and an 88. Perfect boards for all winds in the waves. We've got, this is JJB saying 112 kilos. His boards are 135 and 125 litres, and shopping for a 115 litre board. So, there's a few big boys out there, getting the kit in. We've got Mateus saying, I am 97 kilos today. He might change from day to day. And I have 105 Happy, which is that Bruce board, as his biggest board. Love it. From Sweden. This year, I will try and go with 122 pure quad. And will be really interesting to see how he gets on. Yeah. Because they are definitely different designs, those boards.
Cool.
Got Billy saying the board that works well at Pozo won't work well at Punta Preta at Cape Verde. Very different waves for sure.
Yep.
Also, Billy says the big issue where I sail is the currents and the white water. And that means we need floatier boards with 15 plus litres over body weight. A fast rocker line is also essential, and that is true. Like a flatter rocker gets up and going faster, and you need that maybe bigger fin in that white water, that turbulent water makes a difference.
Yeah.
What else we got here? We've got Patrick saying 80 kilos. Favorite board is his 86 litre Killerfish new rocker from Pablo in Pozo.
Killerfish. What board?
It's a custom board brand from Pozo.
Oh, okay. Never heard of it.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Pablo. I think Joseph Pons used to ride them back in the day, long time ago. But they've got quite a good, they've got quite a good following from around the world.
Cool.
Duarte says Ben mentioned a specific Levi Quattro board, a thruster. In Ibericara, the Quattro quad board works better. That board was more for Hookkeeper as well as the 3 batten sails. And again, that's exactly what it is. We said it before, but the different locations, different kit makes a huge difference. You can't just you got to keep your eyes out. Like I said, do your due diligence, understand what boards sound like you might be interested in, and then once you've got like a short list, I would say, then go and have a look into it deeper and try and find out more information. Again, some people enjoy that sort of stuff. I do. I enjoy that sort of stuff. I'm obviously spoiled. I'm sponsored, but if I wasn't sponsored, I would enjoy the search for the perfect board, or the board for me. I enjoy that stuff. And you don't have to be buying new. I think new boards are amazing, and there's nothing better than unwrapping a new board. I can tell you that much. But there are plenty of good secondhand boards out there. And designs have chilled out a little bit, let's say, in the last few years. And there's not been massive revelations. I know some of my boards, the Simmer Flywave, that design has been around for quite a while and it's still super relevant. You take it out, they've got a new board now, which has got slight tweaks to it. But you take out like the 99 I had yesterday, which is the older version, let's say, which that board's been out for a few years. There's nothing wrong with it. It is a really good board. So if you are on a budget, you don't be scared to look down the secondhand lane, and it can be fun. The only problem you don't have is the warranty and stuff with the secondhand board. I know your mate Antoine Payne was going through a phase where he was worried about breaking boards, so he was just buying every secondhand board. The problem was he was breaking them all, and then you just lose the money totally straight away. There's not even a chance for warranty. So actually, I'm sure he ended up spending more money on those secondhand boards. It's kind of crazy, but he went through a lot. It was kind of interesting.
I've actually got a bit of a trivia question for you. It's not really trivia, more of just a question. You mentioned, don't be scared to go secondhand. Mm-hmm. And obviously in the last few years, the shapes have been pretty refined now. They're fairly set, in a lot of ways. How far back would you recommend you go before the boards start to get a bit flunky? You know what I mean? Like, how far do you think is if you want something that's kind of modern and current?
I was weirdly, you say that. I was asking myself this question the other day. I'm like, hypothetically, you lose your sponsorship, you've got nothing left. There's something cool about riding an old board. You know what I mean? Like, you just kind of. And I was thinking, how far back? Exactly that question would I have to go? Which board could I take? And if I even look at some of the first Flywaves, I wouldn't recommend getting one because they were made in a different factory, which has now been changed for a long time. They're now made in Vietnam. They were made in China, in Jinli, for the first 2 or 3 years before they found out that wasn't a good idea. But that board, but again, I was riding a 75 litre back then, but I remember that board being pretty epic.
So what time? What time is this? Sorry,
that's probably over 10 years ago. Not far off, 12 years. Which I think that's too far back. I think there is definitely a sweet spot, but it's pretty long now. I think you grab a board from 2000 and mid to teens. I think you could get a good board. Like, if I think back to when I first went to Quattro, which must have been 2008, maybe 2009, 2008. I had it was when the first twin fins and stuff were coming out. I had a Quattro Rhythm. This was a pretty good board. I kept it in my garage for ages because I thought, you never know what's going to happen. I don't know where I'm going to go in life. And I thought it would be cool to ride an old board. And I kept it for so long. And in the end, I was like, I got all the Simmer boards and they were better. But I was still, someone bought it off me because they were looking for this exact board. So I think you could ride a board from as much as 15 years ago, and with it being the right board, I think it could still be good. I think within the last 5 years, wow, everything is not everything, but you're going to find a really decent board in that. In the last 10 years, fully rideable, and I think we might be getting to that point in windsurfing, whereas I think some brands or some people have said, they don't last so long, windsurfing boards. I might say the opposite. I'm thinking like, it's like an iPhone. Like, do you feel a need to upgrade your iPhone right now? I don't.
Yeah.
I've had it I've got a 12 or something, and it still does everything I want it to do. And there is a point like where you get to, apart from the fact of having a new board, which is cool. If you can afford it, I'd get a new board, 100%. But if money is the thing, don't think you're totally going to be out of the ballpark. You're going to be in the game if you can get a second-hand board. And some of the clearance deals, I mean, a lot of people will buy clearance equipment. I think that's got to be said, hasn't it? Like, if I'm buying a mountain bike, I'm not buying a new one. I'm buying a new one, but from last year. And I think that's where I'm not saying anything as a secret here. It's like, it's obvious, isn't it? Surely. I'd be very interested to see where people are looking to get your gear. And if you're buying secondhand, you could probably buy a board, use it. Let's say you don't like it, sell it again. Especially if you're haggling on the price and you're getting a good price for a board, you could I know it's not how you do it, but you could test boards that way. I know it's hassle. Some people just want to have a board and that's it, they're done. But I think if you live in a good location, it could be a cool way to do it.
Yeah, no, interesting. Yeah, I've also noticed over the years how there seems to be a general trend with brands where they'll make a board that's a bit more hardcore down the line, and then they've sort of shifted from that to a bit more easygoing. Like, I think when I was buying production boards maybe 6-7 years ago, the boards were a bit more like heavily rocketed and a bit more turny. Now I can't speak for all brands, I don't know, but just some of the ones I've seen lately, there's a bit more sort of just user friendly, gets on the plane quicker, that kind of thing, isn't it?
I think the production boards at the moment, like we were talking about earlier, they are the best design for that brand, that shaper can do as an all-round waveboard. That's where they're putting the effort in. That production board isn't going to be the magic at either end of the scale, but it is going to do everything, and it's going to do a lot of things really well and solid. And then the higher end stuff, it's going to be good, but it's not going to be the best. It can't be, because like we were saying, you can't do everything. If it goes down the line, goes up the line, does something, does jump in, he's like, come on, nothing can do that, because this is just we're living in the real world. We're not bullshitting here. This is just the truth. So this is why most brands do have an onshore style wind swell board and a down. That's it. That's just normal. And then you've got the customs, which do the real ultimate ends of the scale. And that could be, like James, you're 115 kilos and you want a 150 litre board. There isn't a production board that does that. So you've got to go custom. If you want to ride who keep it to the best abilities, maybe some brands have a production board, which is really aimed at that. But I know some of them have been burnt before by offering this type of board. So they've offered this type of board. It's been, like almost who keeper style waveboard. Then people have bought it because the cool guys are on it. And they're like, wow, the graphics look good. It's got all these good reviews because it's amazing at these places. And then it doesn't work for them at their spot. And this can be a problem, and it can damage the brand. So then a lot of people are talking negatively, going, oh, this board shit doesn't plane, doesn't this and that. And the brand's like, hang on a minute. You all said you wanted a board that was exactly like Levi Sivers or exactly like whatever, And it, what you think you want and what you want are not the same. And what you think your level is, I'm not speaking for everyone, but a lot of people maybe think they're a little bit better than they are, and this can also be a problem. So sometimes by categorizing these boards, I've spoke to a lot of people, you're kind of steering someone towards the sort of more user-friendly, more easier waveboard, but that's got the image of that. And that guy doesn't want that image. He wants like the cool image. And there is something to be said for brands kind of doing that, where they've down-tuned some of the board, but they give it the kind of image of this top board. And this, and again, that might sound a little bit deceiving, but sometimes people need to be like that. And then they get on the board, board's amazing. It's freaking great. And I've got on it as just to try out other brands and think, what the guy's doing. And I've been like, oh my God, I've been quite disappointed. I'd never say it to everyone, but it's interesting for me to understand where these brands are at and what people are doing. It's not always clear cut. Again, I'm not digging anyone out. I'm not mentioning any names, but I have noticed that in the past. I can't say I've tried all the new stuff, and I couldn't give you a perfect example, but you definitely have to be a bit open to that.
Yeah, I think it's very tricky for brands, isn't it? Because they're, you know, it's so specific where you are in the world to what the gear, you know, it's, you've got to think, well, where are the bulk of these boards selling? Who is riding them? You know, what's the average weights and ages? Like, there's a whole range of things that you need. The only thing I would say to any manufacturers that are listening, and this is just me, pet peeve, but I just think in the descriptions of the boards on your websites, I would love it just to be as truthful and honest as to what that board is really designed to do. And I'm not talking about, oh, yeah, this is, you know, this is the World Cup board, this is the most radical thing, and then all of a sudden you realize it's not. You know, I mean, like, sorry, I didn't say that very well, but I just think be specific what that board is designed to do. And then the people can choose. You know, I'm not talking about Simmer. Maybe Simmer is really accurate. I'm not sure, but I have experienced it before, where the description of the board, you know, as I said earlier in the podcast, oh, this thing does everything, onshore, offshore, bloody 10 foot, 2 foot, you know, that kind. And you just think, well, yeah, no, that's not really accurate. You know what I mean? So that's the only thing that's probably the only thing I would say for brands, just to be careful of.
Yeah,
because yeah. What's that?
Carry on.
Yeah. No, because the other thing too is, I think, again, maybe I'm wrong, but we're at a stage of windsurfing now where we're kind of, the pool of windsurfing is obviously has condensed to what I would consider the more real enthusiasts in a lot of ways. You know, people who are buying wave gear, they're pretty into it now, aren't they? Yeah. There's not too many people who just dabble in it. Like, they're either in it or they're just not really, you know. So I think that we're at this stage where it's like, well, people actually want to know what is going on with this stuff. But that's just from where I'm sitting. I could be.
I think, though, I just saw a comment here. Well, there's a few. Well, let's just go through them. There's only a few at the end. Mario says, I'm from Portugal, so I don't have the money to buy a board of the year. So I'm always after boards with deals for new boards or 1 to 2 year old boards. And then SJ saying, I would have the money to buy a brand new board, but why should I? And I would say there is nothing better than buying a new board. Like, it's pretty exciting because this, you know, again, you've got to have the money or there's some sort of hype of a new design, or you've been waiting for it to come out. It's got the new graphics. Having a new board that you buy full price, let's say, but then you have it for 5 years. You know, this is pretty cool because you can't have that. And again, everyone's got their own circumstances, but it's pretty exciting getting a board. And this goes to a bit of the podcast, which I was listening to some surfing podcasts. I was speaking to Paul the other day because Nico Preen dropped a video which basically said, why is windsurfing addictive? And it was basically talking about windsurfers being gamblers. And I was like, is that what we talked about in the podcast? And it wasn't. But what it is I've been traveling recently and I'd listened to this surfing podcast, which kind of basically talked about that. And I'd been talking to other windsurfers here saying, we're just gamblers, boys. We are just the full-on gamblers. And it's really interesting subject, I think. And it's a bit like buying a new board, because you're spending this money and the excitement is you're pretty much 80-90% sure it's going to be the board, but you don't know because you haven't tried it yet. You know, we talked about it earlier. The best way to get a board is to try one first and then order it once you've tried it. But that's not that exciting because you've already tried it. So maybe there's something in this thing where you're like, the excitement is almost like Christmas, where you're unpackaging something, you don't know what's inside, and it's like, wait, you know. And I think weirdly, I think there's something in that. You know, a lot of the good thing now is with CAD design and all this sort of stuff, and most of the boards now are at a level where they're pretty good, and it's more, is your sailing up to a certain standard where you can tell, you know, those minor differences. You basically got to get the right genre of board. It's got to fit you, but you know, how much can you push that board compared to the top guys? And you have to buy a board within that. But it's Billy's saying here, actually, my new Severn Pyro 87 arrived last week. Bought it because I wore out my other boards At 10 plus liters from my 77 kilos weight, this 87 should be my all-round board size. Use it with 4 meter to 5 meter. And that's the thing. If you've got a place where you sail and there's one board size that you use most of the time, it's pretty easy, I think, to justify buying a new board. If you live in a venue where the scale is frigging crazy, where you need a big board, a small board, a medium board, and you know all these sails, it's much harder for that guy to then go, well, which board do I put my effort into or put my money into? Because I think it's nice, like in surfing, it's easy for me because I know the kind of sweet spot where I would spend the money on surfing, around 32 liters, not too radical, not too whatever. So I've just bought like an Almeric rocket wide, like for 800 euros, which is way expensive for me for a surfboard. But I kind of go, well, that's going to be my go-to board that I literally pull out and go most of the time. And then I've got a little bit of secondhand, more, different boards either side of that. But you put the effort into that one.
Yeah. And just on something else that may or may not be relevant, but you mentioned before that now you've been using sails up to, was it 5.6, did you say?
Yeah, 5.6.
Was it 5.7? Yeah, 5.6. So what do you think? Do you think it matters the amount of battens in the sail once you go up to those bigger sizes? Because obviously, you know, with the wave sails, that most of them, there's a lot of 4 batten, there's 5 batten, and some sails have 3 battens. Do you think if someone is thinking, you know what, I'm going to add a bigger sail to my quiver, I just have sails with 4 battens, I'm going to add a 5.6, and my bigger sails are 5 normally, do you think it matters that they have to then maybe think about going up to a 5 batten or 4 or anything? Does that come into it at all?
I think
any thoughts on that?
The quick way of going around this, I think it matters how big you are, how heavy you are. So I think the bigger guys might have to use 5 battens. Not always have to, but I think they're more likely to be the guys using 5 battens because the structure of the sail. Obviously, if you get bigger, the gaps between the battens get bigger, and then there's a lot more sail, so you get this squelchy feeling once you get to a certain size with few battens. So obviously that's exaggerated with 3 battens and then 4 battens and then 5 battens is probably the sweet spot for the bigger guys. But feel free to let me know in the comments. I'm not a big guy, but this is just in my experience. The 3 batten sails, again, I have seen bigger guys going for that in, let's say, a smaller size. So they go for it in a 5.0 or a 5.2, and they use the sort of the depth of the sail, because usually a 3 batten sail is quite pulley and quite powerful, and they're able to use a smaller sail than what they would is if it's a 5 batten, because a 5 batten sail obviously it's quite rigid, there's less movement in it, so you have to go for a bigger sail with a 5 batten in my experience. Again, I've got a 5.6 4 batten, and I find that perfect. It's got enough drive, it's got lows in the bottom end, but maybe a bigger guy might find that 4 batten is not it's not got enough tension in it because they're using it in more wind than I would be using it in. And if I'm using a 5.6, they'd have to use a bigger one anyway. I should be getting some 5 batten bigger sails, which I'm going to give it a test, because at the moment my 5.6 is an old 5.6 from a couple of seasons ago. Because I didn't order a new one because I wasn't really using it, and then I dug it out the other day, like I said, and I've been using it a lot. So it's now kind of a sail here in Portugal I'm using a lot, and I will get the new one. So yeah.
Cool. And a couple more comments here. Rob's Wilson, Sea Lion is all-in-one board for windsup and winging. Yeah, we did see that on the video. Obviously, there was some foiling going on. James.
Well, I'll just go back to that. For me, I'm just going to put my 2 pence worth in here. I'm never a big fan of the one board does everything, because it goes back to what we were saying before. It cannot be as good as it can be if it just is specifically for windsurfing, which I know is a very small market and is a very niche product. So are they going to do it for everything? Probably not. But, when you've got a foil box in there, you've got all this in there, it is going to make it heavier, and it's just going to not be as good as it could be as if it was a standalone board. But as that tool which would be a windsurfing light wind board, is only a small fraction of what you'd use it for anyway. So to have a board which is very versatile, where you can do all those things, probably makes more sense to justify buying it. So you can go, well, I can justify the money because I can do that, and that on it. And that kind of makes sense, I guess.
Jack of all trades, master of none. James Crocker, who we just had on. This is why I windsurf. It's the gamble. Thought that your next session might be the best day you've ever had. You just don't get that with cycling and football, etc.
Like I said, when I saw that Nico Preen video, it was really interesting because I was like, it's exactly what I've been talking about, like literally the last month here in Portugal, because we've been a running joke between the guys here. And it is just a gamble. We are just gamblers. We are literally just gamblers. It's quite funny to think of it like that. But the more you think of it, the more you like, oh my God, I'm a gambler. I am, and maybe not so much because, you living over there in WA, you're probably like not the gambler. I'm like where we're living at the moment in the conditions we have. This is what I've been joking about with my friend here who spends half his time in Spain, half the time here. And it's like, we are just the ultimate gamblers. I won't talk about crypto right now, but if we're talking about windsurfing as that as well, it's just, you don't know what you're going to get. And people ask me, why did you move to Sagres, Ben? And why didn't you move somewhere which is, let's say Maui or whatever? It's more consistent all the time. And I've always said the same thing. Like, once you get used to that standard, which is always there, it becomes the norm and it almost becomes boring. Whereas I'm definitely a gambler. I like the chance that you have, like this epic session. But I'm also intrigued by how to get the most out of the other sessions. But the ones like yesterday, which was kind of, I wasn't sure we were going to get it good, and it just turned up to be, compared to Maui, it was rubbish yesterday. Let me just clear this up. It was rubbish compared to somewhere good. But for what you're used to, you're like excited because it was good for what we get normally.
Yeah, I find it's not so much. I mean, sure, if the conditions are good, it's good, but it's how far beyond the expectations that it actually goes is actually when magic happens. Because if you go in with very low expectations and it's, it's really good, it really blows, it's like, wow, that was so much better than I imagined, Or on the flip side, on the flip side, you could see an amazing forecast and you just, in your head, you're hyping it up. This is going to be the best day ever. And you get down there and it's just rubbish. And you're just like,
that is so true, actually. Yeah, it's the expectation. It's how much bigger than the expectation. Because we could have had an amazing forecast. We'd be expecting it to be good and it would have been that and we'd have been disappointed. But because I was kind of thinking, we're not going to get anything. I just dropped our daughter off at school and it was next to the school where I went. And on the way back, I thought, I'll just pop in. I got a message on the WhatsApp group like, hey, looks good. And then it was like, hey, so like you say, kind of it comes out of nowhere. It always feels like it hits better.
You know what? I'm sure if everyone here has windsurfed for a long time or windsurfed many times, I'm sure we've all experienced this. It doesn't happen that often. Like I could probably count on one or two hands in my lifetime, but you have those sessions. One happened to me this season where it was a pretty marginal forecast, 18 knots, 20 knots, something, which is pretty marginal for here. And I really just, like it's Sheridan.
No. You kind of, I'm just laughing at people at home thinking, you twat.
Oh, I know, sorry. And you're sort of there going, I could got other things to do. Oh, should I sail? Yeah, okay, I'll go. So you go in with a very sloppy attitude, just sort of feeling like you shouldn't even be going. But it happened to me this season where I went out because the forecast was not very good. A lot of locals didn't go. So automatically there wasn't actually that many people there. So that was cool. And then, it was one of these days where at the afternoon, like late, the wind just swung from what it's normally cross on to maybe, if you're lucky, kind of cross shore. This day it swings cross off, and some clouds come out and the sun's setting, and all of a sudden the cloud above you is just like bright orange or pink or whatever the color it's gone, and you're out there by yourself, and and then you just you know, all the ingredients come together for a short moment and you just have this magic time that lasts maybe an hour or two, and you get off the water just completely pumped, and you're like, that does not happen often. And I almost just didn't even come today. Like I'm just, you know, and I'm sure as windsurfers, we've all had that at some point. You know, just all of a sudden, it's like the stars align, and all of a sudden, it's just this moment. I have to say, those moments actually, I'm not saying I come back for that, because you might never get that again, but you get them, and it gives you this real sense of, shit, I'm happy I'm a windsurfer right now. Like that it sort of gives you this big boost of like, oh, I would, you know what I mean? It's like a real, I don't know.
That's
it's
the
weird.
thing. Like, just going to James's comment that you've got there, like if you go and play squash, or you go and play tennis or football, it's kind of how well you play, or how well the team plays, or whatever, depicts on how well you feel, I guess, afterwards, or whatever. Whereas windsurfing, even if you were sailing average but the conditions are good, you know, like you're gonna get a few, because the conditions, you're just not in control. Which is kind of mad, really. You're kind of not, and that's the crazy thing. Which it must be a big pull, because like we've got another friend here, Vincent. He's got a twin brother, and you know, he knows he windsurfs, but he's never watched him windsurf. So he's over at the moment. He lives up the road. He traveled in like an hour, because he's like, oh, they were meant to be going fishing, but it was too windy. So he's like, oh, why don't you come? You know, I'll go windsurfing for a little bit, and then maybe we do something. He's like, oh yeah. So he drives an hour with him in the car. He goes out at the first spot, rigs up. You know, it's all a bit of a palaver. You walk down the beach, because in Portugal it's quite a long way. Maya Praia, right near the beach. Goes out, doesn't get out. There's no wind. Like, it's too cross off. The wind has moved round. Starts pissing down with rain. He comes in, de-rigs, thinking, oh, that's it. And he's like, oh no, we're going to go and try the other beach, because the bay bends round. So we drive down to the other bit of the beach, rigs up, goes out. We wobble out. He's just behind me, gets caught by a set, breaks his mast, comes in, de-rigs. That's it. And he's just talking to me going, my brother has never seen me sail. This is his first introduction to windsurfing. And he's there going, what the hell is this all about? Is this enjoyable? It's like, you know, it's kind of mad when you look at it like that.
Actually, that's a good point, because on the flip side, you can have a magic day, and sometimes you can have days where you're like, fuck this sport, I'm out. Like, you know, excuse my language, but...
But they happen. Like, I got a wave the other day. That day, I went out, I got one wave, like, came down, like, pretty underpowered, got an aerial, landed, came into the beach, the wind just dropped pretty much. That was it. There's one wave. And but in the meantime, I'd got to the beach, because my van, the clutch has just gone on my Ducato, on the way to the beach. Like, I pushed the clutch down, it got stuck. I don't know what's wrong with it, but I couldn't change gear. I was at the beach. I was like, brilliant. So I went to get my gear out. I'm rigging up. I'm one of the earliest there. I'm like, I forgot my boom, because I put my stuff from Cape Town in, but I forgot I left my boom in Cape Town for next year. I was just going to leave one there. I didn't have it. So I had to drive all the way home to get this bloody boom, which is like half an hour. So an hour drive back again. Then I get there, and these guys are just coming in going, oh, it's the worst session ever. We didn't even get out. And then we're going to go down to the other place. And then I go down to the other place, rig up, go out, one wave, finished. In the meantime, I had to drive home with this clutch, I couldn't start it. So I had to put it into gear when it was out, then start it, like jumping around. Like, I had to do it in second. And then I tried to drive all the way home in second. But then I was like putting my foot underneath. Anyway, it's a right mission. It was an absolute mission. But yeah, anyway.
That's classic. You know, the other thing I'll say here too, since we're sort of going on about all this, but there's obviously the gamble. God, I just lost my train of thought. That's what it was. Have you noticed, maybe it's just me, but that windsurfers, they tend to be very good at handling like things that aren't stable. You know what I mean? Because they're so used to going down to the beach and being either let down by a forecast, or the wind goes from 10 knots to 25, or being on the water and having to, rescue themselves, because their mast is broken. They're quite resilient generally, and very good at handling just whatever's presented to them. Like, like if you have a small child and they don't get their ice cream, they have a tantrum. Windsurfers, there might be some personalities that might have the odd tantrum here and there, but I just meant like in general, windsurfers, they're actually very flexible to the occasion. Does that make sense? Like, I
would say most.
Yeah. I'm not saying 100%, but I'd say better than average, than the average punter out there. I think windsurfing teaches you to you have to kind of go with the flow a bit, depending on what's going on. And if you're not that way inclined, it'll kick you in that direction. You just have to be, because there's no. Yeah, I find that I actually find that really valuable for windsurfing for me, because that carries on to other aspects of life. Life will just throw at you weird stuff that you didn't think about, and just having that windsurf mindset, you kind of have some tools in the shed to that you've developed over the years with that. Yeah, I don't know. That's
especially I think kids. I remember seeing a program, or someone was explaining to me why sailing or windsurfing, is a great sport for kids to get into, and what it teaches them without knowing it's a lesson, and exactly what you were saying then, just that disappointment, the changing of things that are out of your control, and it's not, you can't control them, so you have to control how you adapt to them. And his life lessons, I don't know, I should find it. There was a really cool video that explained why you should get your kids into windsurfing. And I thought that's actually probably one of the most, I don't know if it was windsurfing, it could have even been sailing, but I thought to myself, that is a great video, because that's what the brands should be putting money into, is creating this type of video. Because if you can convince the parents that it's good for children to get into windsurfing with these lessons that, which you don't have to teach them, you're kind of like, well, that's half the battle. It's not actually doing all the other stuff. This bit is like, convince the parents that this is good for your kids. I think it's quite cool.
Yeah, and it can be it's probably easier these days with the modern equipment, but I remember learning all those years ago, it was incredibly frustrating at times. You need to build up some resilience to just get to the, to water start, to jibe. It's not always super straightforward. So that resilience is cool. But anyway, no, it's what do you reckon, Benny? Do we
I think we're done, man.
Probably
I think we've bored everyone off. Let us know in the comments. So let us know in the comments if you're enjoying the podcast. If you haven't subscribed to the podcast channel, this isn't Windsurfing TV anymore. This is its own podcast channel. Only subscribe if you're into podcasts. Also, we're always looking for new ideas for podcasts. So if you have any ideas, any subjects you want us to bring up, to talk about, we're going to try and bring more people in, different people. It's always good to have different stuff. I did have a comment last week that I kind of say the same things over and over again. I didn't get to the bottom of exactly what he meant by that, but I'll try not to do that. I'm not doing it consciously, that's for sure. So I apologize. But yes, it was all good. We're going to get Lucas Meldrum and Mr. Mellon. They're over in Chile at the moment. We brought them on the podcast last year, and they're going back over again. They're going to be trying to bash their way into the middle, I guess, into the goal. I don't know how it works this year. I actually have to speak to them about it. But we're going to do a little bit of build-up for Chile, because the first 5-star wave event of the Peterway calendar and IWT calendar is coming up very soon on the 23rd. So only just over a week away. We'll be bringing you how the forecast's looking. I spoke to Mark Paré as well. So he's keen to do it. So there's lots to talk about. Obviously, is that Puerto Rico?
Yeah, I just thought we'll just quickly end it, because otherwise we might miss it. But this was the final result of the Puerto Rico. It was Bert Rodiger in first place, Takara Ishii in second. How do you pronounce it? Vincent Beauvalet? How do you pronounce
Beauvalet. That sounds good.
Yeah, Beauvalet. And Federico Mauricio. So they were in the final without going into too much detail. And then in the women's, here we are. The final was Maria Andres, Kaylin Holmes, Coco Favreau, and Denise Blonde. So
local,
anyway, Okay, cool. Yeah, so that was just a super quick little recap there for anyone that may have missed it. So
yeah, we're doing a bit of a recap on that because I think Mark will come on at some point. Maybe we'll see.
Oh, okay.
To talk about Chile, and he was there in Puerto Rico, so maybe he can give us a little bit of a rundown. Roughly what happened, but it really cool to see a new event on tour. I could see from the guys over there. They said, there was mixed feelings. Obviously, they didn't quite get the conditions they wanted. It looked like the next week was windy. So unfortunately for that, but I love to see the new events on tour and, people putting in the effort to organize these and create the money to do it. So I thought that was really good anyway. So let's see. Oh, yeah, hello. We've got a beer chipped in there. Looks like coffee, tea. Matty Claire. Cheers, mate.
Thank you, Matty. We appreciate that, man. Yeah. Awesome. Thanks, guys. Thanks for everyone for joining in again and supporting the channel, and look forward to catching you very soon.
Yeah. See you later.
It's that time of the week again. Sit back, relax, we got the brain of band. No need to stress, in the house is Van Bellen. The game is windsurfing, you can't yell them or tell them. We get the news, the views, the win biz. The brand's gear tips plus the world's best quiz. Cars PWA, we're professionals without the pay. There's nothing in pole dancing that we won't chat. From tandem boards to a windsurfing cat. It's your one-stop shop for a laugh and listen. Tune in each week or you'll be doing the missing.